within this one subsection, I have a couple of suggestions. One,
Well, can I just finish my thought on what
sure.
the discussion we've been having?
Yeah.
So am I hearing that maybe we need an additional allowance for temporary signs for businesses that aren't, that the temporary sign isn't specifically tied to a promotion or special event, but it is just the regular offerings?
that's your concern.
You're saying you don't care for them.
Oh, I'm saying that there probably needs to be an allowance for them, just like what Martha said, but they should be restricted from becoming a permanent fixture.
Device is misspelled, sorry.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I was trying to get to.
yes.
You got him.
Yeah.
So do we want to call them a promotional sign or a special event sign?
Well, it'll be a.
Or do we want to simply call them out separately
Are allowed
altogether?
as follows. So let's.
I think there'd be
let's
somewhere
look at
other
that
than this
section.
particular subsection.
under temporary signs?
Yeah.
Right.
You want to include sandwich boards under temporary signs?
Well, maybe under, yeah, whichever way you want to do it, prohibited signs, have them as prohibited except for temporary.
It says,
For the sandwich boards is what I'm thinking. No, I know that's the way, I don't think that the sandwich boards fit within this subsection. One, I think you'd have a separate thing for sandwich boards, so it's very clear that's what we're dealing with.
Actually, a lot of times those sandwich boards are used exactly the way these describe.
I had so attention, balloons, inflatable signs, streamers, pennants, other attention-getting devices. When you look in into the paragraph, all of those things, I think, are things that move, right? So that are gonna distract
Right.
motorists.
Right.
So I don't know if we need to, maybe between other and attention-getting devices, other movable, do we want to say movable to distinguish it from things that don't move? And then there's a question that those flags that Gina hates, which I agree, they're obnoxious, but I don't know if those fit in there either, because they don't really move, the pole bends,
Well,
and the flag.
But
is-
the material moves because it is material and it blows in the wind.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, if you put movable or something, in the actual caption, it might better distinguish what we're
Well, I
talking
think-
about there.
I think, in the section, it says made of lightweight fabric or similar material
Yeah.
designed to rotate,
Or
my
move.
suggestion,
Or
move with the wind, comma, or move with pumped air, so you get the flappy, Gumby people covered, that direct the motor.
The guy who dances on the corner with.
Yes, yeah.
Those are not filled with air.
No.
Aren't they-
No,
Aren't they moved with pumped air?
No, he's talking of.
She's talking about something.
Oh, about the people.
People,
the guy out there.
Yeah.
Sign spinners.
Yeah.
the sign spinner guy.
They're kind of funny sometimes.
Kind of an employment development.
Hey, I was gonna say, you're taking away a job.
So we're not gonna talk about it.
No, let's leave those guys.
I actually think sandwich boards are used in the way the temporary signs should be used in the
Yes.
way the temporary
Right.
signs are listed here. It's just we don't list sandwich boards anywhere so that you know that that's.
Okay.
I think
So-
my feeling is that we're gonna cover sandwich boards, we're gonna have a separate subsection that covers sandwich boards.
So do you think it's necessary to call them out as a prohibited sign on a permanent basis, referring to them as a temporary sign and then adding provisions under temporary signs?
I was
that-
thinking under the exempt signs, you might list them as temporary and then refer temporary promotional signage or something like that. And then refer them to the temporary signs section.
But wouldn't that be under prohibited signs, not exempt signs?
Yeah, because I think the
Well, they are
intent,
exempt, whether
isn't the
they're-
intent is to limit the amount of time in which the sandwich sign is out on display?
Right.
So they're not a permanent signage technique.
The way this subsection B goes is that they're prohibited except when used.
Well, that would be okay too.
Yeah.
That would be consistent treatment.
So we want to,
No, it's so hard. There are times when they're fine and they might make sense as part of somebody's permanent thing. And there are times, it just depends where they are.
Talk about pushback, I think you're gonna get a lot of
You're
Murphy's
gonna get
pushback
a
on.
huge amount.
what
of
I'm seeing a lot
everywhere.
too, that I don't think we're
Hotels.
specifically addressing is a lot of sandwich boards and other signage is literally off-site. So what I'm seeing now a lot is, your business is stuck way down Main Street and it's not something, there's really no reason to go down there really. I'm using San Andreas as an example. They're trying to kind of revitalize downtown Main Street and trying to get more people, more businesses in there. But there are businesses that are down there that nobody knows about. And so what I've seen is people are now starting to put signage up at the highway
Yeah,
that notifies people, and that includes, fabric signs as well as the sandwich boards.
And sometimes 5 sandwich boards.
Yeah,
Yeah, so.
and those are all off-site. I mean, not a single one of them, but if they didn't have them there, then people wouldn't know that there's something going on at the Metropolitan, or that, there's massage therapy at the beauty salon down the street.
substitutes for billboards, I mean,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
But the problem comes about when they're putting them on other people's
Right.
property or on the.
See, those
In the-
are off-site and they're
They're
prohibited.
off-site, they're prohibited, and if they need them, I would encourage them to have a permanent sign.
Right.
But then that requires going through a process to get permission, and they might not be able to get it if they're dealing with residents or the county. So, we don't want to make it any harder on our businesses.
Right.
At the same time, it starts to look like a flea market. So I don't know what the right answer is.
I don't know, but we try to avoid torches and pitchforks.
Yes, exactly.
So I just want to kind of back up a little bit on this discussion. So your current code does include sandwich boards, banners, pennants, flags, all this as the promotional signs.
Yeah.
And similar to the standards that we've drafted, they can be displayed for a maximum of 14 days. So it's really kind of carrying forward the existing. So as Gabriel mentioned, anything that was conforming today would continue, to be allowed. I would, so in response to kind of the wanting to call out sandwich boards separately, the approach in this section was to treat signage generally versus to assign sign allowances to each individual type of sign. That was kind of done purposefully because that is the way your current code does it, and to not be so complex, to kind of simplify. So whether you're, whatever kind of promotional or temporary sign you are, you know, it's kind of treated the same. So anyway, that's why in this section, you don't see all the different allowances for different types of sign. You're given one signage allowance and you're able to kind of allocate that how, you know, kind of you deem appropriate. So I just want to kind of back up a little bit on the approach to that, and then also kind of just remind ourselves of what the current allowances are.
So I don't see where you have the overall sign allotment that I think you just referred to.
You're gonna measure the sign area and you're
Well,
gonna talk
measured,
about that.
but that's
It's gonna-
individual signs.
But there's a total allotment based on the size. So it's in here.
Okay,
We'll get to there.
okay.
I just don't see where sandwich boards fit cleanly into any section here.
Okay.
I don't, that's my, and maybe, the real situation right now is the sandwich boards that are problematic aren't allowed under today's
Right.
Right.
ordinance, but it doesn't matter because people just continue to do it and believe that it's necessary for their businesses. So it seems like we're just perpetuating an unclear situation if we don't address it at all. So, and you know, we've had times in the past when the county has attempted to kind of clamp down on those temporary signs and ask people to remove them.
Oh,
And
boy.
for a little while, they get cleaned up for a month or so.
I have to
And
tell
then
you,
they
that was
make
quite
their
the
way
task.
back out into the streets.
Yeah. Signage is very personal.
Yeah, I
And,
don't
and,
know what the
and,
right
and
answer
there
is.
was a lot of controversy over our enforcement of signage. We had one or two employees that were tasked to do nothing more than sign enforcement, and it was a huge undertaking. And we made a lot of people very angry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
That
understand.
really seems like something that if somebody complains, it needs to be addressed, but I don't know, do you have people going out and sign police?
No,
No, I mean, it would be a code compliance issue. If somebody were to file a formal complaint of another business or an individual that was, had signage exceeding the,
people are afraid to.
the allowable
They
sign
don't
code,
wanna- Yeah.
they would have to
nobody
go
wants
out and enforce the zoning code for the violation, but.
And maybe we just rely on the section that doesn't allow you to impede the
Right.
traffic flow, whether pedestrians or bikes or whatever.
Right.
And continue the way we are.
I suppose if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Oh, it is broke.
But, well, in some places, but is it really?
Are people complaining about it?
Yes, I hear complaints all the time about how terrible it looks and how they're in the way, but nobody wants to get into a little spat with their neighbor. That's really the bottom line. People don't want to,
So other businesses are complaining, you're hearing?
the
Or
public,
People.
people visiting, whatever, all sorts, yeah. You hear it from everybody. Except the person who has the sign.
Maybe Murphy's just needs to come up with their own sign
They-
ordinance.
we're trying to find other businesses.
I don't know. I mean, I guess we do have a way right here by just, if it is actually in the way, and if it's actually off-site, it's not allowed at all, right?
No.
So that's, I see now quite a lot of off-site
Right,
signs.
right.
That are not just temporary signs even, that have become
Permanent.
permanent.
They are there permanently, even if they're not anchored to the
Yeah,
ground.
So I think that's really the deal. I mean, I think we've got enough, regulation and code right now that's being carried forward that would allow us to enforce if in fact we had a formal
Enforcing.
complaint. And I think that's the main thing is if people feel that, serious about the sign issues in certain, communities, then they're gonna have to take it upon themselves to come out and file a complaint with our co-compliance department so they can go out and enforce the potential violation.
But we all know that enforcement is difficult to achieve. So that's actually part of a whole different section
Right.
up here that we're gonna be discussing, so I'm willing to leave it at what we've got.
So do we want to include sandwich boards specifically back into code? Because I don't think that we actually,
Exactly, like, should they, are they the
as a
same thing as
promotional, where did we have it now under a promotional sign?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
I would.
was that acceptable to everyone if we include sandwich boards in the promotional signage
In promotion.
under,
Yeah.
under temporary?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
got it.
Now, in the prohibited signs, I noticed there isn't anything about prohibiting signs attached to utility poles, which I thought was,
Utility, I thought we had
I expected to see it. I didn't.
Thought I did.
located in the public right of way, warning signs. Please, I've read it, it's in here. Signs affixed to trees.
Public radio, please.
But you have the, in the public right of way.
Or on public property unless
Yeah,
otherwise.
but
But that's
PG&E
sometimes-
property,
yeah.
it's not that.
Signs.
We can,
affixed to trees.
we'll either find it or we'll add it in.
Okay,
It could be kind of combined with signs affixed to trees, utility
Right.
poles,
yeah.
directional signage posts, all of that.
Okay,
Of course, that is where I attach all those no parking signs that are temporary for the day of the event.
yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, I'm just raising the question.
Yeah.
No more violating county code.
Except they're, where else are you gonna put them? You haven't been required to put them up.
A sandwich board.
I don't think that would, that's an interesting idea. Really huge ones that say we're gonna show
Okay.
you what.
We
Okay.
Move into measuring sign area.
Yes.
It seems to me this is a wonderful illustration, but I don't see where it's relevant because we slip right down into A and B is that the sign area of a sign with a single face area is the area of the sign face, which would include the background. I don't
didn't understand that either.
I don't
A
understand
lot of questions. on
why
it.
the illustration, because it doesn't seem to have any limitation.
Yeah, I always took it as the sign itself.
But that isn't what it says. So-
No, I agree. I have
So what-
lots of questions about this.
Well, I think what it's trying to depict is how do you calculate a sign area, not, so if you have a cabinet sign, according to this graphic, you take the letters within the cabinet, not the cabinet itself.
Right.
That's never how we have.
But that doesn't
Calculated in the
make sense. I mean, you could
past.
have, so you could have a sign with its contents being this big
Right,
and a sign that's this big.
right,
Right.
With a
right.
fancy border all the way
Yeah.
around it.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
clearly
Yeah.
the sign.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where I think this section is
This
trying
is
to
pretty
show.
standard though, isn't it, Martha? I mean, in other jurisdictions?
Not necessarily. I've seen
No.
jurisdictions that actually calculate the size of the cabinet. And as long as the sign fits into the cabinet, the total sign area would be the cabinet area. However, I've also seen jurisdictions where if the sign within the cabinet is an electric sign, which is, it's illuminated, they tend to only count the sign itself, like, like a neon portion, a lit portion of a cabinet. So it depends. I mean, it depends on For example, if this were in a shopping center, there will be some kind of a master sign program that would actually identify how you calculate some of these sign areas. So it's really, we have the choice to either look at the cabinet or just the sign itself.
And when you say cabinet, you're talking about the
Yeah,
actual
that-
placard or
Right, right.
whatever it is.
Right.
And of course, you've got,
Cabinet that
well,
you
you,
slide.
yeah, you've got a combination of things. You could have a cabinet that's backlit with letters,
No,
or you can have a wooden sign with letters, that doesn't include illumination at all. And I think,
Yeah.
I mean, even those are still, in my opinion, much different when you think of,
But you
overall-
have to take the whole cabinet because those
Exactly,
change and
yeah.
the next guy's amount. So you're calculating the amount for the whole frontage of the shopping
Yeah.
center. And the next guy has graphics that fill the entire cabinet. You can't then take away some of that signage from the tenant
then-
next door.
I didn't
That's a
see
good
any
point.
text that went with this illustration. The text under A and B, we're talking about the area of the sign face. And A, B, C, and D is the total area of the sign. So there doesn't seem to be any text that deals with this illustration, and I don't see the point of the illustration.
Yeah, I think this is the case where so we weren't ready
Yes,
to
there.
do the illustrations, and we thought we would be helpful to kind of drop one in that we had, and I don't think that was the correct one. So I think what you're talking about is more measuring sign area
Yeah,
along these lines.
right.
Yeah.
That's
So,
what the text says.
okay,
Yeah,
so we will revise that.
okay.
Yeah. And it would just, instead of having the height labeled as length, it would be nice to label it as height.
But apparently, we're not gonna have the illustration.
I know, but if
Yeah,
they're,
okay.
if
If
they're
that comes
named
in.
on
Yes.
on the new version also.
Right,
It would just be helpful to,
height and width.
the more commonly used
Yeah.
description. Yeah, that would- the other one you just showed seemed like way more along the lines of what I was expecting. So that might take care of that.
Yeah,
This whole multi-faced faceted sign section seems new. I don't remember that from
Yeah, I don't think you have anything or your current code is silent on that.
yeah, that's all new.
it made sense.
yeah, it made sense to me also.
Oh, and now, when we get into required permits and under subsection D, I guess this is what you were talking about, Martha, as far as the comprehensive sign program. Okay.
I think that's a nice addition.
Everyone okay with the required permit section? 1709-060.
On the review authority, so all, under 4, review authority, all comprehensive sign program, subject to review and approval of the review authority, which I guess is the planning director. Okay. For the project with which the signs are associated.
I don't think it's necessarily the director, if like, if a CUP is required.
Well, that's
or-
true.
I think
Then it
that would
goes-
mean that
yeah.
it would be whoever
Right.
reviews the entire.
But if it's just the comprehensive sign program, that would be a zoning clearance that would go to the director. But yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we should I'm just trying to clarify what the review authority is.
Well, it could involve public works, if a comprehensive one could have
Or
custom
Caltrans.
street signs, so
Yeah.
it would look, so then public works would review them to make sure they still, that makes sense.
Right.
So, but can't a comprehensive sign program be the project
In itself?
in itself?
Yeah, it could.
Well, you could process it separately, but it would be like, so if it's for a shopping center and you,
Right.
and that shopping center required a CUP, the planning commission was the review authority for that. So then if they came in later with a comprehensive sign program, it would go to the planning commission because the planning commission was the review authority for that project.
For that,
What if it was a permitted use though, Martha? So all we needed was a ministerial building permit for the shopping center.
Then it's the director.
Okay.
That's what I
yeah, I would think, I mean, when you talk about the project, I think of the project as of that, the project that's being considered at that point, not
Right.
something that had already been considered in the past.
But somebody could be rehabbing an old subdivision or multi-use complex and doing a new sign.
Right.
So that could be the project, although it most likely have other components to it as well.
Okay,
It seems like that explained that pretty well.
okay. So in the signed copy, the next section, 07, basically changes to the content of the sign are okay and don't have to be approved as long as they're not a public nuisance. That's at least what I'm getting out of it.
If they're for an adult entertainment facility, they might.
That's. Okay. Now, I'd move on to D, changeable copy. I get confused when we talk about automatic changeable copy, electronic message center signs, and electronic digital displays, which are in 17.09.040. Where we have copy can be changed, but then we get to B, static message displays shall contain static messages only. I guess I need some examples as to what is covered, what signs would be covered by paragraph 2, subsection.
So that would be any sign, so maybe you have a community bulletin board, but somebody doesn't actually change the letters, the message changes periodically, right? But while that message is up, it's just there. Basketball game tonight.
Yeah,
It shouldn't.
And there's not like a moving basketball.
Yeah.
Right. That would be, I think an example would be the sign at Calaveras Lumber.
Yes.
Don't they have, they've got the
They do.
electronic sign and they can
A
change
lot of
the,
schools and some of the
and the
churches even
schools?
have them.
Yes, yes.
I think my confusion got riled with in which copy can be changed or altered by electric, so electronic other machines. And what you're talking about is once they are changed, they will stay the same until they're changed again, but it's not something that's going to be changing every 15 seconds. Is
No,
that?
it can change every
8 seconds.
unlighted interval between copy displays of 0.3 seconds or more, and it can't change more than every 8 seconds. It
Oh,
can
I'm
change.
sorry, where?
It can't, it's
where
in
are
the
you?
display duration, under small a.
Under A.
Oh, okay,
2A.
okay.
The static means not static for a long period of time, but it means that it doesn't look animated. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So display shall contain static messages only. That's, you can't have something, a banner type thing running
Right.
across it and this sort of thing. It's just that they, when they're there, they are static. They can't change more frequently than once every 8 seconds. Okay. Don't we have signs in the county that move?
I'm sure we do.
I'm sure we
Yeah.
probably do.
Okay.
They're trying for them not to become a big distraction.
Yeah, right, especially drivers.
Well, and frankly, they're hard to read anyway. I mean, as you're driving down the road and everything's, changing copy and moving,
Being
it's,
in Las Vegas.
yeah, exactly.
Well, it's
We have one.
Caltrans, you know,
we have
Caltrans will
one
have their signs
Here
saying,
in San Andreas, Adventist Health Center, they have this a monument sign that has changeable copy. It even advertises events that may not even happen on their property, and it does all kinds of stuff. I'm still trying to figure out what the history is with that particular sign, because our code, at least the current code, doesn't allow advertising event, but they're providing more of a public service. They talk about things that are happening in the community, so maybe they have an exemption status. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
I don't think we
Uh-oh.
can have content-based exceptions. I think
Yeah.
we need to, it's not like, we have to have it based on time, place, manner, not the content. The sign defining what's a community service.
Mark Twain has a changeable sign also that says.
That's what he's referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that's back to what I was saying, that there's a lot of places where people now have signs up that are for business that's blocks, if not miles away, that we didn't or used to allow. But a lot of them have been there a long time. I think just as long as no one's complaining.
of course, you have the Caltrans changeable signs that say, road blocked, Mountain Ranch, and you're about to pass the sign, and it doesn't, you haven't reached Monday through Thursday. I mean, these signs.
Stop in the road.
We just need to
Yeah,
drive.
exactly. Anyhow,
For the 8 seconds for it to flop over to the next section.
we can't deal with that.
Anyway, right. Okay.
Well, again, are billboards going to be defined in the definitions?
Yes.
Here.
No, they're,
Under sign height.
yeah, and that's what brought it to mind, is that we have billboards also under allowed signage, and I just assume it's going to be defined somewhere. Now, point one. Signage. Subsection one. Seems that saying the thing twice. Property owner shall select the elevation of the structure that is considered the principal elevation. Blah, 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 blah. In the event of more than one entry, the property owner shall select which entrance is to be considered the principal. Can't we just do with the first sentence?
So I'll maybe look to Gina's input on this. This is some existing language.
Yeah.
I mean,
I kind of like it just because, you might have a building on a corner lot
Yeah,
that could presumably have two elevations. It just, to me,
Well, what-
it's one more level of explanation
it,
that kind of gives you an example of, hey, you know, in the event that you've got more than one considered principal elevation, you have to choose one.
So I see that as problematic, and hospital's a good example, actually, because it could be on a corner.
Yeah.
And both elevations, I don't know how you would choose one as your principal elevation over the other. And they both might need different signage,
right.
because one might be the outpatient services
Right.
and another's emergency services.
Right.
And
Well, and I agree, I could see some benefit in, you know, having that signage on both elevations, because obviously if you're on one street, you can't see the other elevation, and it's still necessary to be able to identify what that business is.
And the same thing with the shopping center that is L-shaped and has two
Yeah.
long arms instead of one, because it's on a
Right.
corner.
So this is
it-
carried forward, so if we think that it's a little too restrictive, then, you know, this is the time to change it.
Yeah.
seems to me it is, I mean,
Yeah. It's been problematic as we've reviewed sign permits in the past, you know, especially, you know, bigger, you know, corporations that are coming in, not necessarily, you know, individual mom and pop stores, but, you know, the bigger corporations that are starting up businesses in this scenario, and, you know, they've always got, you know, signage on both elevations, and it's just been a real struggle trying to get them to understand, you know, there are limitations in the code in that respect.
Dina, should it be 1 square foot of sign area per linear foot of building elevation, but you have to use it on that building elevation?
Yeah.
So you can't take the,
yeah.
Right.
Right,
Okay,
yeah.
So if
Uh,
we
oh.
allowed it on anything facing the public way.
right.
Yeah, on that subject, did we, do you know if we changed how we allocate sign area to properties that are corner lots? In most jurisdictions, you get 1 square foot of sign area per linear street frontage per street. In our current code, we only do it for 1 street. So if you have a corner property, you got frontage on Avenue A, and you got frontage on Avenue B, you only get your total sign area is calculated based on your street frontage on Avenue A. But if, in most jurisdictions, if you have frontage on 2 sides, front and side, your total sign area increases by virtue of your location.
Yeah,
Interior
that's
lots.
exactly what we just
Is that what we're
discussed.
doing now? Because that's not what we have before.
No, that's not how it's written now, and so the discussion was just, should we loosen that up and allow signage to be on both elevations rather than making them choose one or the other?
No, I'm not talking
And-
about elevations, Gina, I'm talking about frontage, the street. How do we calculate total sign area for a property that is at the corner of 2 streets?
Yeah,
We
that's,
calculate them separately by
But
elevation.
by elevation.
right,
Right,
by-
okay.
Is that what you?
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's what it should be.
So
Yeah.
there's another situation that we don't have often, but we do have in the county, and that Tim, I think, is talking about, which is, and which we mentioned earlier, which is when you have internal circulation, like a large parking lot in the center, and there are businesses whose only frontage is on that parking lot. Shouldn't they also be allowed signage? That might not come up a lot
Yeah.
here in our
Well,
county.
I think of the hospital. You know, when you pull into the hospital parking lot and you look up at the building, you expect to see a sign saying, come here or go there, or something like that.
I mean, that could come,
that's not overall, that's not, you know, advertising dignity health, that is more of an identification of a
that's more of a
service.
directional, that's more of a directional
Or
sign.
even a directional sign.
Where do we say that we're only talking about promotional under allowed signing?
Typically, directional signs are permitted. You don't calculate sign area if they're less than 2 square feet. I mean, you don't really need a billboard for a directional sign. If you're within the grounds of the hospital, all you really need to get from point A to point B might be just little signs with an arrow that says radiology, you go that way, or whatever. I don't know if that's what you were referring to.
I think in the case of Dignity Health, because of the visibility and the way their building is skewed on the property, you would say that has two frontages and you would give them both of those frontages.
Yes.
But
The
not-
elevation
Yeah.
fronting
Yeah.
that direction, even if it's not square or parallel exactly.
But
You need
Okay.
some interpretation of visibility, but I also think we do need to address where you have internal circulation or parking lots that are not against a street, but there are businesses that face onto that, they should get to have a sign on that face. They shouldn't have to take it away from one of the other faces.
yeah, I mean,
I
that's,
think you have that Valley Springs maybe in some, that development that
Yeah.
has.
right,
Yeah.
more value.
And in Angels Camp, but we don't get to tell Angels Camp what to do, so it doesn't matter. They work that out. I'm sure in Copper they have that situation also in Town Center.
So we want to allow signage on all road-facing elevations or parking lot.
Yeah, I would say in the case of a development that has internal parking lots, not, and businesses facing onto them.
Yeah, I think the goal here is to make sure that whatever number of signs there are do not exceed the total sign area that the property can have. And how, so that, to me, that's the major deciding factor here is if your site is allowed 250 square feet of sign in total, how you break it down is really, could be based on different sets of criteria. But at no point should we allow signs within a development that exceed the total sign area allocated for that particular site.
But I think you could allocate it based on any elevation with primary entrances to a business,
That's good.
then that elevation should be counted. That
Eligible.
makes sense, Martha?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things we can work through, but I understand what you're looking for.
That's all we need to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
You have such
I'll
confidence.
let you and Gina take it from here.
So are you
Yeah.
also saying that you want to allow signage in excess of, say, for instance, 250 square feet total? I mean, because we do have a maximum total square footage.
Yeah,
It would depend on the size of the development there, I mean.
No, I don't think we should allow signs to exceed the total sign area for the site, period. How they
So
break it
you
down.
get
Yeah,
this amount of signage, however you want to use it.
We're
absolutely.
talking about a multiple business shopping
Exactly.
center.
There's some, I think, well, actually, that's, I think the part.
I mean, there are ways of calculating shopping center signs, there are ways of calculating other signs, but at no point do we want to allow signs within a development to exceed the total square footage of signs allowed for that site, or else it defeats the purpose.
Typical can sign might be 30 inches or 24 inches for the simplicity of math today. So 2 times 8, 16 square feet. And every business in that development should be allowed to have one of those. That would make sense. And so that would mean that if you had more than 20 individual tenants in there, they wouldn't be allowed that. That would exceed the 250, and you could easily have a shopping center that the 250 would not make sense for them. Every single business would not be allowed an actual basic sign
I think
identifying them.
I think what I'm hearing, and we'll need to work out how to write it, but I think what I'm hearing is that there should be a maximum sign area per site, a guaranteed kind of minimum signage per tenant, right? Because everybody should be able to have some sort of sign. And then really there is an avenue for something beyond that, and that's the comprehensive sign program. So I think Gina and I just need to work through restructuring this.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking if we could just direct them, if they require more, to the comprehensive sign program.
Okay.
But we'll establish a maximum amount. We'll ensure each tenant gets a minimum amount of signage, and then, yeah, anything else you can have a special consideration.
Right. Sounds perfect.
So,
Tim, page 47, there goes your billboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we need to have some discussion about that.
well, first, on the directional, on subsection C, directional signs pursuant to the Outdoor Advertising Act. Now, the way I understand the Outdoor Advertising Act, this whole chapter is within the section 5227 exception to it. But maybe instead of pursuant to, just say consistent with the Outdoor Advertising Act? And the first word, direction, I think should be directional.
And are directional signs only allowed for businesses that rely on recreation-oriented clientele?
That's the way code is currently written.
And
No, it shouldn't be.
I think the last, if so, the last sentence of that paragraph should really become the first sentence, because it says the overall purpose of directional signs is to inform tourists and travel visitors to the county of various recreational features. If that's so, why don't we put that at the very beginning, and then we,
This is the road signage, directional signs,
Right.
not directional
Not
signs
directional
within
signs
a
within-
campus.
Yeah,
So there's two different kinds of,
absolutely. Yeah,
so directional signs within a property would be a separate thing, I think, and
Right.
they're usually exempt.
Right. So this would be,
Like.
Moaning
wineries,
Caverns,
say,
yeah.
Moaning Caverns, food and gas.
Yeah.
I think it's okay, it might need a different name.
well, I think if you start the paragraph with that sentence that comes at the end of that paragraph,
Okay.
Yeah,
it
Okay.
makes it clear what
right,
we're talking about.
that would.
47. Thank you. At the top, C.
But we're jumping around a bit.
A bit.
Thank you.
We're moving so fast.
I never heard that before. Too fast.
It's like they're more informational, or
Yeah, well,
I'm not sure.
So do we want to limit the directional signs to recreation?
Well, we also have signs that say where the library is.
Or where the government center
Other
is.
community
Mm-hmm.
kinds of important things.
It shouldn't be recreational only. Government center, city hall,
Exactly,
Like
so it
say
should be more like.
police
various
informational.
recreation, we can say recreation, cultural and governmental features.
Exactly,
And then
Okay.
because museums could be a,
I would just say on these two sections, so C and D, directional signs and billboards, are very unique to Calaveras County. So for some reason, you wrote these at
Yeah.
some point. These aren't common ones that I see.
yeah.
Um,
We should
So-
change it.
So that's why we carried them forward, not knowing, why it was recreation-oriented clientele, why all this was in there. kind of knowing that they were purposeful. So,
Was probably because the caverns were the first places
Right.
to get those.
Right.
And I think things like historic sites, community parks, cultural things, all of those should fall within this section.
Okay.
Historically, it should be added.
Yeah.
We just tossed that in.
So I think let Gina and Martha massage it a bit.
But I don't,
The
since
concept,
it is Calaveras County, we don't need to say pursuant to the Outdoor Advertising Act. I mean, I don't think that phrase is needed.
I guess what I don't know, and this is beyond kind of my specialty, is there something in that Outdoor Advertising Act that enables the county, if you did write an ordinance saying that, I just don't know.
Well, as long as it's not prohibited, we don't really need to, by the act, we don't need to mention the act.
But
And if nothing else, I think we want to say, if we're going to say something about it, we should say consistent with, not pursuant to, because pursuant to sounds as if there's something in the act that deals with directional signs, which I don't think there is.
I think that act is something that Caltrans uses because Caltrans has very limited signage along these lines, although they do allow a lot of this kind of thing. But I don't believe that the county on its own roadways would need to limit things as stringently as Caltrans chooses to.
Or is this even necessary? Like, I don't know what would happen if this were to go away.
I think this is what allows us to have off-site signage that gets people to things that are draws.
And they might actually be businesses, but they're of cultural significance.
I don't think.
Okay, and so these are not in the right of way?
Well, you might. Yeah, I think that's why the recreation
They're not-
is in there, because it is both a business
Yeah.
and,
When I'm
but
thinking.
it's a tourist draw.
I'm thinking directional signs, when I'm thinking of what directional signs I've noticed throughout the county, they are literally billboards. And I'm finding them, and correct me if you think that I'm wrong, but I mainly notice them on private property along our highways.
We often have there's signs like this all over that are just like this big and say caverns.
Yeah,
Or they say that they do point people to, or a community park, something
Right.
like that. So I think that's what these are. So they're more like the size of a larger street sign.
Okay.
And sometimes, like in Amador County, they have them for their winery district,
yeah, okay,
tasting rooms this way.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is good. I just don't know if
Okay.
directional is the word.
Yeah, just
Okay.
directing people.
Well, I think that the word directional is intentional just to prevent off-site advertising.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
Maybe
And-
we need something in there that says that it's not for advertising purposes.
That's a hard line.
but do we want to exclude it from businesses, just in general?
No,
No, but it can't be, what we don't want it to say is, Moaning Caverns, and then 5 lines of descriptions of all the things, get your tickets here, or a hashtag, whatever.
It's gotta be.
It could just say
thrills, excitement.
caverns, right? Was there something you wanted?
Well, yeah, so I'm trying to keep up.
Come on up.
Yes, please, Kathy, get up.
So the question that I have is, I'm looking at what's up here and what was posted on IQM2, and I'm not able to reconcile
IQM2.
what's on the county website for the meeting today on the agenda. So it has the full agenda. It doesn't have whatever that document is. It has,
It should.
has the stuff. That's why, I was wondering why.
Oh, because this is a rollover.
It's a rollover.
This is a
It's the
rollover from the
previous
previous
section.
study session.
This is the end of our
So
last.
we've kind of got,
So I'm late?
It's okay.
no, actually, you're early.
No, it's fine.
We're interested, if
It's
you're
okay.
interested in.
So obviously,
Through the whole thing, we can come back to any piece at any time.
so I haven't had time to look at the whole thing because I was looking at something different.
Oh, okay.
So I just,
So-
from a business economic development perspective, obviously, you know, we want good signage, we want appropriate signage, we want it to look nice in our county. But I think that there's probably some more discussion, but I'm not ready to give, because I was looking at the wrong document.
I can, you want me to meet with you maybe tomorrow and get you kind of
Caught up?
updated with what?
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And then I know I missed public comment because I was at the Calaveras, Good Morning Calaveras this morning, which was fabulous, by the way.
How do you get to everything? I couldn't figure it out.
We haven't.
Oh, you haven't?
No, we kind of,
Oh, sweet, then I can talk about GHG.
anybody here when we just kind of rolled right into discussions.
Okay, I just wanted to talk about GHG for a minute.
Oh,
That would be this.
For public comment?
Be on the agenda
That's tomorrow?
Come on the 14th.
on the 14th of December.
Meeting tomorrow.
Are we meeting now?
We're not
And
meeting.
I'm confused.
Meeting tomorrow. It would be on the 14th
December
of
14th.
December.
Okay, so there is, so that's why it's
And that's
not on
on-
the
Well,
agenda.
we have a public comments.
Well, it's also on the agenda. GHG
Yeah.
is on the agenda for that,
For the 14th.
for the 14th.
Okay, but not
So,
today.
Again, it's a continued discussion. And so, and also zoning will be on the agenda as continued
Right.
discussion.
Got
So
it.
we've got the regular planning commission agenda
Right.
on our second and fourth Thursday, which includes the greenhouse gas and any other business relating, you know, planning business that the planning commission needs to consider. We're doing specific study sessions for the zoning code update on Wednesdays, rolling those over to the end of a regular agenda Thursday.
Okay, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
So just so you have it though, so the only meeting in December is the 14th.
Yes.
And then we will start again on January 11th with Wednesday zoning meetings as long as we need them. And our regular second and fourth Thursdays.
Okay, I'll figure it out. I mean, it's gonna be on the county calendar, so I'll be able to figure it out.
It'll be on the calendar once
Yeah.
Gina has a chance to.
Yeah.
I'll meet with you tomorrow and I'll run you through everything and
Thank you,
kind
Gina.
of get you updated. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Guys, have a great day.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, I'd go down to D4. Is there anything before that?
D4?
D4, billboards.
Another
No,
outdoor
Oh, okay.
just before Department of Transportation, we need to say California Department.
So billboards are not allowed on any coffee route. They can't, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Good observation. So oddly enough, you know, we restrict billboards to the C2 and the M2 zones only with a use permit. Drive up and down highways in the county and you tell me where you're finding billboards. They're not located in C2 or M2 for the most part. You'll find them all over the place in ag land.
Yes, big time.
Because that's really what's bordering our highways, and that's really where you're finding most of the billboards, so. And right now, what's happening is people are just erecting billboards, and without enforcement over a certain period of time, those become legal billboards. So anything that's, you know, put up illegally.
Pre-existing ones at the time we first did the billboard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, you know, with the understanding that there's lots of land that borders our, you know, our highways, which is where you want a billboard, assuming.
On the other hand, we want to keep our rural
Mm-hmm.
scenic beauty.
Yeah,
on both the designated and non-designated
Yeah.
scenic routes, and billboards are not scenic.
yeah.
So
Well,
do you
imagine
limit the
this-
distance between allowed
But
signs?
the Outdoor Advertising Act, does it occupy this area? Does the state occupy this area?
Oh, tell us
With the billboard?
where?
Yeah, does it?
I honestly don't
And I
know.
think it only is within their right of way.
In the right of way.
So they're not in the right of way.
No.
Yeah.
These billboards, these
The
billboards.
billboards are not in the right of way. The
Well, I just-
majority of them are on private property.
Because at one point in that act, it says it occupies the whole field of regulation, except zoning regulations. So,
So that, and then that tells us that we obviously have the authority to dictate where we want,
if we put it within
Yes,
zoning,
right.
should be able to do it.
right?
So.
So the
we-
question is with the understanding that we've already got a ton of signage or billboards that are out on properties that are not zone C2 and M2, M4, or M2, excuse me. Do you want to allow them in other zones, or do we simply want to keep it restricted to C2? I mean, if you think about where C2 is, that's all in our townside areas. I can't imagine a billboard sitting in the
Right.
middle of San Andreas. And there are a couple billboards in the middle of Valley Springs. And they're very close to each other. And, you know, is that really an appropriate place to force people to put a billboard? Assuming that they want one.
I'm torn. My personal
Yeah.
feeling is I'd rather not have billboards, period.
Right.
I don't think they're consistent with our rural character, but I also don't think we can take them away from
Right.
places that have traditionally had them.
Well,
So how do you draw that line?
on Highway 49, you have that Blue Mountain marijuana sign up there. And so you have those types of facilities, those types of billboards already in the county. I don't think the intent of billboard ordinances, I know there was a time when there was so much clutter on highways and freeways that communities had to start to regulate the location of billboards. But there is a sense of a protected right when it comes to billboards. I don't think we can outrightly ban them. I think we can regulate them. But limiting them only to specifically zoned areas, I don't think is beneficial one way or the other. If they're a form of advertising, I think we should be able to allow them where they might be appropriate, which means that, you know, that the visibility is good, it's set back from the right-of-way by a particular distance, as opposed to just saying it has to only be in a C2 zone or a C1 zone. Because for folks who are in the cannabis industry, they're not always zone commercial, and they have those billboards in the county already.
Is there a way we can just limit billboards to the existing billboards? We have enough billboards in the county.
Between-
That's what our current policy was, but you can see people just put them
They
up.
just put
Right.
them up.
There's no enforcement.
Well, if we can restate that and then enforce it, it would, you know,
So they're not allowed on state and national scenic byways, period. Absolutely, you lose your designation for allowing that. You're perfectly allowed to ban them.
I think one of my fears is, anybody drive through Clements lately?
That big sign? Big
And
electric,
it's double-faced.
yes. That is a whopper.
That thing is huge. It's this
Oh,
big
yes.
electronic,
And
it's a big electronic billboard, double-sided billboard right off the highway, right smack dab in the middle of town.
Yes,
And
it is just.
it is just gigantic and it sticks out like a sore thumb. And that's great for the people that want to, you know, advertise on it, but it is just in your
So did they
face.
get a permit to put it?
Oh, I'm assuming so. I mean, it's Clements, so obviously it's well out of our jurisdiction, but what I'm saying is, I mean, that is in my opinion, really out of place for that little community. And if we're only allowing billboards to go in C2 and M2, then we're basically, any new billboard would be forced
Concentrating them.
to be placed in a similar situation right in the middle of one of our towns. And I just can't see that as being appropriate.
No, I agree. But I also don't think you want to allow them with no, just anybody who has a piece of ag land that's against a state highway or a major artery, to have a billboard. It's not.
Can you limit by distance between?
Probably, where is Lady Bird Johnson when we need her?
How do you choose which? So
Based
the
on
guy
what's
that
already
gets there
existing?
first,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's
But-
the.
You got, if you're gonna limit it,
I mean, we have, in my time here, which is
Yes.
27 years, we have had one application for a billboard, and that's down in the Burson area, or in between Burson and Valley Springs on that industrial piece. That is the only billboard application that we've ever considered. Or I should say, that's ever been submitted for consideration.
Well,
And that was a very controversial discussion. There was a lot of people that came out opposing the billboard at that time.
Well, back to the question, okay, so are we being realistic as far as that we're not gonna be able to take away anybody's current billboard?
Correct.
Is that, that's a starting point.
Right.
What do we do about banning any future billboards outside of the C2 and
what's
M2
existing.
zone? You know, what if, I mean, I understand that as of right now, there is in effect such a ban because we don't provide.
Well,
for it.
because we're not allowing them, sure.
Yeah, but if we actually restate that ban and then enforce it, you know, what's the downside? Enforce it going forward.
The other thing with billboards is, once you allow that billboard, they sell that billboard space to anybody they
Right,
like. So
right.
you're-
Yeah.
Because we can't, then, it's a business basically.
Right.
We can't tell them who they can. So,
Right, I mean, the medical marijuana dispensary billboard that Gabriel's talking about advertised Forest Meadows for years and years and years and years.
right.
And then the face changed, so, I mean, yes, you're correct.
So, I mean, I would be most comfortable with severely limiting any new billboards. But on the other hand, to say that there is no situation in which a billboard would be appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, if you keep, if you keep this the way it is.
I seem to remember litigation regarding billboards directly, and I can't seem to remember how it went, but there is a movement out there that protects billboards as a form of advertising, and they're not going away. So there might be, maybe this is one area we want to research the legal provisions of billboards, because I think we're going to find litigation regarding billboards and how we can or cannot regulate them.
There's lots of rural areas that are banning billboards because it has become an issue in a lot of places that are dependent on their, the character of the area.
Right.
And
'Cause-
billboards aren't seen as being,
does Martha have any input
Yeah.
on this subject by any chance?
Well, I had a couple thoughts. I don't know that they're great solutions. So one, any billboard requires a conditional use permit. So even if you allowed it in other zones, it's still a discretionary process that you're going through. And then the other piece was if you know that you don't want any more in C2, which is your town centers, you could take that out and further limit it to just M2. Those are kind of the opposite kind of things, but
Maybe we could do a little, just look at what other places that have recently redone. Well, Martha probably has a sense of what other places she's worked with have done about billboards.
people don't touch their billboard sections very often, right? So they're either prohibiting them and not allowing new ones, or they have some provisions that were established and they maintain those to avoid kind of opening up the discussion.
So Martha, you're saying that as far as you understand, we do have the ability to basically not allow any new billboards?
And again, this is,
Okay. Maybe we could do a little research.
Yeah, it sounds, I
Yeah.
haven't looked at the outdoor
we-
advertising act.
yeah, I would defer to
Okay.
council because when it gets
Put on
into
the
this,
list.
Yes.
Julie, put it on the list.
I will look it up also.
Okay. Yeah, let's do a little more homework.
I would tend to take the C2 out.
I have to agree with you, Tim. I just don't think it's an appropriate place. I think it's, stuck right in the middle of our town
You're
sites
right, Gina.
along the highway. I just think it's ugly,
And it encourages a business to put up a billboard and advertise other businesses on it.
Yeah, right, right.
And maybe it's, the best thing is to keep the M2 zones, printed in M2 zone upon approval of a conditional use permit. But then just make sure that that's enforced.
Yeah.
Right.
I just,
Which would be
I just
effectively banned.
recall,
Yes.
the case I was thinking about was the Metro Media, Inc. versus the City of San Diego, and this is a 1981 case. And it was about the City of San Diego enacting an ordinance prohibiting billboards. And I think these are cases that have gone as far as the Supreme Court. So I think we need to be a little bit more, we need to do a little bit more research before we jump one way or the other.
Okay,
'Cause I
all agree.
I just remember,
Yeah.
that.
We all agree.
so for right now, we'll take out C2 and leave the rest.
And do more research. Moving right along.
Yes. Community identification signs.
It's unclear to me just
We're almost
who,
done.
Those are the new ones we're
Until the
getting,
next
right?
section.
We
No.
got 2 more pages.
but who is going
This came about when we had a request to install or erect a new community sign. Then that got us thinking, we didn't have anything in the code at that time to address community signs, but yet every single community has some sort of signage identifying the community. And so we literally did a full, tour of the county and identified all the community signs that we could find to realize that, hey, this is something that we need to address. And I do believe it was Murphy's that was proposing to change their signage or put up a new sign, or if I remember right, yeah.
We had an old one that we
Yeah,
rehabbed many, many, many times, but it was.
yeah. And I think you put it on at a new location.
New location.
Yeah.
I think instead of saying the name of a recognized community, we just say a community identified in the general plan.
Okay.
Because then it at least has some limitation. It's unclear as to who could apply for the community sign.
Whoever wanted to pay to install it.
Yeah,
maybe.
that's the way it appears.
But because every community is now getting a new community sign as part of the Clean California project that Caltrans and
applied for.
Oh,
You know, that everybody's looked at their proposed, we're all getting a new gateway sign, so.
who's we?
We, every recognized community town in Calaveras County.
Can't wait to see sheep ranches.
Well, so Sheep Ranch, I don't know that Sheep Ranch is getting one, so that's true. But all the significant ones along the
We're
highway,
discriminating against Sheep Ranch?
That's
yeah,
right.
It seems like.
Well,
with-
So you may want to think about just referring to recognized community that's recognized in the general plan, because currently, the current regulations actually list out 27 recognized communities, including Sheep Ranch. And I know in my discussions with Gina in developing this, it was like, you know, could there be something a little kind of more broad than having to list out every kind of single one? For example, the 27,
Yeah.
which is why we broadly called it a recognized community and then gave some examples.
Yeah, well, I think by the way that it's presented here, you could say, oh, well, those are communities that have at least 350 people or something of that sort. But if we just say community identified in the general plan, and wherever your list of 27 communities were.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
uh,
and there's consistency there, it's nice.
I think that's a good, actually, because then the general plan could always be amended
Yeah.
and.
Affect this.
You know, I'm sorry, but I'm looking back and under the billboards thing, the very last subsection of the billboards thing is, in the event of a conflict between state law and the local code, the stricter interpretation shall apply. Well, if there's a conflict,
State law
the
should
state's
apply.
got to apply, so.
Yeah.
Oh, I think what they meant, you're right, that could be rephrased. Usually we're allowed to be stricter, but
Yes.
then if we're stricter from a legal term of art point of view, it's not considered a conflict. There's
Yeah.
so I can,
That needs to be
Oh.
massaged.
Maybe some
Yeah.
wording.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump back.
we could even just say, unless otherwise prohibited by state law, local code can be stricter or something like that.
The
Yeah, something like
local,
that.
this section shall apply unless, just what you said.
Unless otherwise prohibited by state law.
We want our local code to apply unless
Yes, we can.
it's
By state
prohibited
law.
by state law.
Yeah.
Unless otherwise prohibited by state law, any stricter provisions of local code shall apply.
Well, strict, and then you get into stricter than what, you know?
Just take some.
Just a-
Julie, I wonder if this could be struck because there'll be just general
Right.
Yeah.
applicability provisions.
I agree.
Exactly, I think
Yeah,
so.
That might be a better.
Good point.
That's right. Okay.
Less is
Back to the
best.
community identification
Okay.
signs, we're more comfortable. I think under area, subsection 2, sign shall not exceed 60 square feet in sign area, or if two-sided, 120 square feet in sign area. Oh, I'm sorry, you have it
Yeah,
two-sided.
Yeah,
It
it's
says
after.
Sorry,
it's a-
I wrote that in before I got to the last sentence.
Can I
Okay.
just ask a question?
Ahead of your reading.
I had a concern of, and I don't know if it's something shared by the commission about the phrase community theme in E1. I'm just wondering, does that mean Mountain Ranch might have a giant cannabis leaf? I mean, I'm just trying, what is a
Well,
community?
I think
theme?
like the
They might.
Murphy's is noted as what, the queen, is it Murphy's that's the queen of the Sierras? Yeah.
But does that mean a picture, is that text or is that a picture? Community, I'm not sure.
Well, that could be
Well, I think-
text.
In the current project, every community voted on what they thought what graphic was most representative of their community.
So it could be in there.
So
They actually already are graphics? Is
yeah,
this
you
it?
what they're known
you can
for.
see them, there's a,
Oh, I didn't know that.
there's a
Okay.
website for it. You can go look and see what the current designs all are.
Okay, sorry,
I
I
think
thought
there's a
that this
link
was,
from COGS.
it sounded vague to me, and I was just wondering if that would be a free-for-all, but I didn't realize that there was actually.
What was the title of that project? You don't know?
Community gateway signage, something
Oh,
like
okay.
that. I'm sure I have the information on it. Because they had open houses and public meetings for people to weigh in on it.
I must be living under a rock.
The-
I think they're going in fairly.
Good.
So, who does get to apply to, like, in other words, what if 3 neighbors decide to put up a community identification sign? I guess, I'm just wondering if it matters.
Since we don't have city governments.
Right.
Right.
You know, I guess we just leave it loose.
But
should there
maybe
be
it's
public
not an
comment?
administrative use permit, maybe it needs to be a conditional use permit, because the rest of the community should get to weigh in on it. Like somebody just says, I represent
Yes,
Sheep Ranch.
right.
And I'm gonna
Right.
put up
Yeah.
And we have, I want the Rolling Stones logo.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Uh,
But,
The official album of Sheep Ranch.
but that could also be, you know, pretty burdensome and infeasible when you talk about the application fee and the process of going through a CUP versus an AUP. And let's face it, I mean, our community signs are likely to be, you know, money that's, you know, just, I mean, you're usually on some sort of a limited budget
And the
because we
AUP
just
is
don't,
AUP's $100, right?
yeah.
And
Well,
the-
no, an AUP for this would be, I think, 1,000 something,
And
but,
the AUP,
I mean, it's better than almost $6,000 for a
That seems
CUP,
a little excessive.
I think.
I think there's also, isn't there an ability for nonprofits to apply for a fee waiver as well?
You can ask for a fee waiver, but that has to come down from the board.
Go to the board.
but, and also you have public notice with the AUP.
Yeah.
I think
you-
that's
do.
the point.
300
Public
foot.
Notice.
Yeah.
But it's only with
You
the
can do that
people
with-
within
300 feet of the
300 feet.
location,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's not gonna be
It's
the
about
community.
Well,
Yeah.
but knowing most communities, if you have people within 300 feet, they're gonna tell the other people in the town.
But it's like, who do you notify though? I mean, do you want to notify every member of the community? Because, you know, where Murphy's has got business associations and other organized groups, Sheep Ranch doesn't likely to have anything
Oh,
like that.
You just don't know what's festering
Oh,
out
okay.
there.
Maybe a requirement of the application for, and keep it in AUP, and require that the applicant provide proof that they have done outreach to the community
I love that.
in the form of a local public meeting, an advertisement, postings,
That's what I
you
was.
know?
The county has indemnification agreements, which would require some sort of signature from some
Somebody.
persons or the other. So it's covered.
And
I have a question, how would that Golden subdivision sign?
It wouldn't affect anything.
No, that's a
that's
subdivision
existing.
sign. It's covered under a different section.
I would just say on the community identification signs, you could keep it as an administrative use permit, which does require the public noticing. The minimum required public noticing is 300 feet. The county can always
Yeah,
do
that's-
more.
Do it.
The county could always, if there's a local newspaper, or could expand the notice. Also, with administrative use permit, the director can elevate anything to the planning commission where the director finds that either there's, controversy, or just the decision would be better made at the planning commission level. So if you say went into it and there were questions of whether this was representative of the community or whether there was community work done or more outreach, and maybe the applicant wasn't willing to do that, the director could always elevate it to the planning commission for consideration.
I
think-
think all that's true, and I would still require the applicant to do some community outreach for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think as a part of the applicant's burden, prove to the director that there's been significant community outreach. Maybe just leave it at that.
Right, and it could be left to the director to make the determination
Yeah.
of what's actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
But I think those are all good points, and making it more expensive is not a good idea.
Yeah.
yeah. Now, we also have county ID signs, but I guess they're all up and we don't regulate us.
No.
Okay.
Do as I do, or I say, not as I do, I guess, but.
We're back to temporary signs.
Okay.
Will there be a definition of promotional sign?
Actually, before we get, at E4,
Okay?
signs shall be architecturally compatible
Yes.
with the community area. What are we really looking for as far as architectural compatibility?
Says the
Because-
review authority.
Yeah, because I'm not sure each section, each area, each neighborhood of the county has a distinctive architecture.
Uh-huh.
Some places do, and some places don't.
Becoming more and more common.
I think they're trying to give you discretion so that you
Yeah.
can look at the big picture.
Okay,
No, actually, look at a picture of where the sign's gonna be and see
Yeah.
what else is around it and.
right,
Some areas are not gonna want circus colors,
right,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
right? I mean, they could do that, and you certainly wouldn't want that, and not in our community.
Right. I think any community that's going to the expense, time and expense of trying to put up a common sign is going to at least try to do something that they believe is in keeping with their community.
okay.
And I guess we're reaching out to them for comment. right?
Well, yeah.
They
So
would
I
say,
think-
no, I don't want
yeah.
circus colors, you know?
Right. I think once you've done the noticing and given people an opportunity to comment, you'll know. They
You'll
think
get a
it's-
consensus.
And I think the communities are small enough, if we expand that notification, then word's gonna get around really quickly.
Oh, yeah, and people have opinions.
Oh, yes, they do.
So the project that's currently going on, Murphy's won the prize for being the most difficult community to get consensus in.
Are we moving on to temporary signs?
my question is there a definition, will there be a definition?
I think maybe we'll just include something in here like signs that, are promoting kind of expand upon the definition or
Expand.
what promotional signs entails.
Uh-huh, okay,
To me, promotional sounds like it's
something coming up.
commercial,
Oh,
because it's a special event signs as a separate thing. But
in special event signs, I don't understand this. In the midst of the paragraph, is erected more than 7 days prior to the event. We have under subsection B, one of the requirements that they're posted for no longer than 6 weeks prior to the event. it sounds as if you can't erect a sign 6 days prior to the event. I just don't see any reason for this erected more than 7 days prior to the event.
Well, I think that is designed to curtail those who might want to use a promotional sign as some form of semi-permanent, more long-term temporary signage. The purpose of promotional sign is to specifically identify events that would be taking place on a particular place, on a particular date,
Yeah.
or something like that, and should be
But why-
limited.
Why require that those signs be put up more than 7 days before?
I think it's
Less than.
it should be
Less
less than
than.
7 days. I think that's a typo,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Well, no, but then under B, you have, they're
Right.
posted no longer than 6 weeks prior to the event, so
Yeah.
there's, then it's inconsistent.
Right.
So it,
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that should just be taken out. That erected more than 7 days prior should be taken out.
thank you. It took me a while to.
Something to keep in mind is that banners in the county are only allowed to be up for 2 weeks total. So when you have a banner promoting an event,
You mean like over a highway or a
No,
roadway?
Store-
over the
like a
Main Street
store.
Murphy's
Yeah.
or the highway in
2
Arnold,
weeks.
they're only allowed to be up for 2 weeks.
So you
I
think
don't
we
know.
need to change the 6 weeks to 2 weeks?
Well, I'm just saying that somebody at some point decided that 2 weeks was an
Yeah.
appropriate amount
Yeah.
of time. I have no idea where that came from.
6 weeks seems a little long.
It seems like a very long time, but I guess it would depend what it was. Like, say what you have is the hazardous waste collection thing, and you want to put that sign up far enough in advance so that people know about it. Of course, that is the county, so.
I would say that 6 weeks is your current allowance for these signs. And I think more than 2 weeks is pretty common for things like performances and stuff where,
Right.
and events, so people can get them on their calendars and aware of them. So,
And buy their tickets, and,
Yeah,
you
6
know.
weeks.
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be
So do we want to leave 6?
Eric, so. You want to be able to promote your event adequately.
Okay?
I'm not sure what the 7 days is trying to tell us
Well, they're taking it out, so don't worry about
entirely.
it. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Well, you were talking about saying less than,
Well,
which doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. It's gone. So new development signs, I'd have a question on 4D as in dog. Sounds a maximum of 1 sign per parcel frontage. I mean, depending on the size of the parcels, you could have 60 signs along the road. Should we have a limit on the number? You know, maximum of 1 sign per parcel frontage, up to a limit of, with a total maximum of number of signs? You know, this all depends on the size
So
of
are
the
you,
parcels.
do you imagine a scenario where a parcel would have more than 10 frontages? I mean,
No,
I,
it's
Already,
it's a
they're,
develop,
they're
yeah.
a
I mean,
development,
limited to 6 signs, maximum total number of signs.
Oh, okay.
Maximum
Yeah.
6 signs shall be permitted.
okay. So, subject to that,
Okay.
you can have no more than 1 sign per parcel,
Right.
okay?
We're getting close, 'cause I need a restaurant break.
Okay. How are we doing? Okay.
If we're gonna go until 1:30, why we ought to have it right about now.
Yeah,
Well, maybe what we want to do is finish up with signage. We can break for a short lunch break and then come back and then,
if we're only gonna go till
We're only gonna
1,
go a little longer.
so we don't need lunch.
okay,
1:30, I thought.
Said you
Oh,
needed to go.
1:30, I thought you had to leave.
yeah. Are we going to 1 or 1:30?
So excited.
Okay, 1 or 1:30, doesn't, whichever,
Yeah.
whatever works for everybody, what's.
When do you have to leave, Julie?
I mean,
And when do you have?
I have to drive to Monterey tonight, so that was the reason.
But you have
but-
I have to leave town in my vehicle, driving away no later than 2 o'clock.
That's what it
So,
was. I don't think I said anything.
So let's
go to
say
1:30.
2 o'clock.
Yeah, and if it
Let-
goes over a little.
Let's take a 13-minute break.
13 minutes?
11:30 right now,
And then go to
and come back, and then we'll just get as far as we get by 1 o'clock, so that these two can get in their vehicles with all their clothing.
I'm gonna
Not run into each other.
stuff.
And go home.
Okay. Are we ready? Is there anything we want to talk about on new development signs before we move on to non-conforming signs?
Nope.
All righty. The non-conforming sign seems like this typical stuff to me.
I wasn't quite clear on C2. Non-conforming sign may be restored if it meets the following criteria. A sign that constitutes a nuisance to the public or is unsafe. We're talking about structurally unsafe, I guess, or structurally a nuisance.
I would say
Yeah.
it could be structurally, or it could be something that is, placement, like restricts vision clearance.
But then it
But then
can,
they only talk about the building official,
but
so.
then it may be restored if it's,
No, it doesn't say it be restored.
yeah, that's under C. A
It
non-conforming
says you can
sign.
restore a non-conforming sign, but not one that's determined to be a nuisance.
Well,
That's
that's
how
what,
it reads.
that's what it doesn't, why it doesn't make sense to me.
Says
This is for
Or
if a
it meets
sign,
either of the following criteria.
Oh, it's a nuisance, let's restore it, yeah. You see the problem, Martha?
right, but this is just for a damaged sign. So if you have a damaged sign, a non-conforming sign that becomes damaged, you can restore it if that damage is kind of less than 50%. Or if the damage, maybe you don't meet that criteria, but whatever the damage does make it unsafe.
So do we need the constitutes a nuisance to the public?
No, we could take that out. Yeah, we could say a sign that is unsafe.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Right, do we even need it?
That's what she's saying.
Okay, sign maintenance and enforcement.
Now, sign maintenance and enforcement, the sentence that starts at the bottom of page 49 and goes on to 50, wouldn't that just be taken care of in enforcement? Signs not maintained in conformance with this section shall be deemed a public nuisance and subject to the enforcement. Do we?
Well, I was actually wondering why under non-conforming signs, we weren't saying that a sign determined to be a nuisance and that cannot be restored can be required to be removed. Or a non-conforming sign that was determined to have been erected without a permit under the
previous, like, that,
Well, that would be an illegal sign,
right,
yeah.
Non-conforming implies that it is
non-conforming,
lawful.
Right.
but legal, not
But-
Right,
non-conforming.
right.
So we're just not using the word legal because that's
Right.
what non-conforming
Right,
means.
okay.
So you're right, if a sign was erected without a building permit that otherwise needed one, then that would not be a non-conforming sign, that would
Or
be an
conditional
unlawful
use
sign.
permit that
Right,
otherwise
that would be an
needs-
illegal sign.
Yes. Okay.
Sure. .120B, I recall some advice that there could be problems here with B.
It's fine to say that any violation of Title 17 shall be deemed a public nuisance as a general regulation. This makes it sound like enforcement is mandatory, and enforcement is always supposed to be, I understand we want it, but I don't know that it's even legal to require enforcement. That is just generally a discretionary activity by counties and cities. So I would say,
Would that problem be solved if we just change the word shall to may?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Beginning of B?
yeah, and I also am not totally clear. I mean, right now, nuisance abatement is done by by code enforcement, which is a division of under the building official. And I'm not sure that there's an intent by the board, or the board would want us to necessarily divide that up into different, I feel like we're trying to consolidate enforcement in that shop as opposed to having different enforcement by different shops.
Isn't code enforcement under the jurisdiction of the building official anyway?
It is, and I'm just saying, but it says that the planning director can declare public nuisance. I mean, I think, I don't know that it matters to have that in there. I just don't know if we want to have a separate enforcement division for Title 17 under planning. And there's some other enforcement sections in the admin reg that makes it sound like we're setting ourselves up for a whole separate enforcement division. And
It is a
I'm
little odd because they only enforce, correct me if I'm wrong, county building code and Title
No,
17,
they-
right?
No, they actually, I want to try to bring it up right now.
They
My
also
internet's
do environmental health.
There are a number of ordinances that we have for different land use departments that make it sound like they can do their own enforcement, but but in reality, they're not set up. Nobody has trained code enforcement officials. And so there's sort of a blanket provision in 8.06, which I'd like to bring up now if my computer will behave, which it hasn't been. And I believe Title 17 is expressly mentioned, and 8.06 is something enforced by the building official. So unless the board wants to divide that up, or if Doug wants to divide that up, I think that he's planning on enforcing violations of the zoning code. And certainly Gabriel, the director, would be working with him to understand the nature of the violations, just like environmental health works with them to understand the nature of the violation of their own code. But I don't know that we'd want to have a duplicate set of enforcement provisions that have different language than 8.06.
If that, the first sentence of section B just ends with nuisances. So you just say, may result in such signs being found public nuisances.
I just don't know why we need B at all if we have an enforcement section. I'm wondering, Martha, was there a reason for a special section for signs?
Well, because this is your existing code language.
Oh.
But
There you
that-
go.
I was gonna say the same thing along those lines, Julie. I wonder if we could even just end A at, take out the last sentence of A.
Yeah.
And delete B.
Yeah.
And I know you were looking particularly at the enforcement section, and we can just make sure that covers everything it needs to cover.
Sounds good.
Yes,
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea.
me too. Actually, that's gonna, a great intro into the next section.
We can
Admin
jump right to
procedures.
enforcement.
Well, I want to say first that the admin procedures thing, it seems so cleaned up and so nice. But it resulted in me having a lot of just overarching questions of understanding and because it's been made so consistent and parallel through all the different parts, that we have to be even more careful about getting that language that we're repeating right.
Yeah, and I want to going into this, it's very easy to edit somebody else's work. I think the quality of the work that has gone into this to get it to where we are today is remarkably good. And I sound as if I'm carping at many, many things, but if I can improve on it, that's great. But I really appreciate the quality of what we've been presented with.
And how you can actually find the information.
Yeah.
So, but it's gonna create opportunities in many other areas of our county code. to clean
Will there
things up.
be, you mentioned before that terms that are used that will have a definition somewhere else will be, I forgot what you used, but highlighted online,
Hyperlinked.
hyperlinked. In the plain copy, in the printed version of the ordinance, will there be any indication that such a definition exists somewhere else? Because it seems to me there's so many questions that come up of, well, where did this come from? Or, we've been presented this in a very organized manner, in that, okay, now we're into administration, and we're going to get to all the things that we were wondering about before. I understand that it might clutter things up, that if you had a actual reference in the other articles to the administration provisions, as far as when you're dealing with administrative use permits.
A link to the
A
administrative.
link, yeah, but I do think that online it's going to be great to have the hyperlinks. Is there any equivalent can be done on the plain copy?
Well, I think that is, so you're right, you've been looking at this in pieces and we've been kind of walking through. We're gonna put it all together and look at it. And in looking at it, we'll be thinking of kind of that general comment, you just made. And so we have been, like, Gina and I've kind of talked about different options, and I think we want to stay to how we put it together. What is the most helpful without making it unhelpful, like making it too clunky and seemingly complex. So that's my long way of saying, like, we just don't know how exactly that's gonna look yet.
I just, perhaps, just using an asterisk in the plain copy, and then somewhere at the start of the code, say, an asterisk indicates if you're looking online, you will get a hyperlink.
But I think similarly, if you print the same document that gets uploaded online, it will show up with underlining and in color. And so-
Right.
And then you have
Yeah.
the asterisk that says underlined and in color in the electronic version are hyperlinked.
I guess that's what I mean. We need to, like, in a way, like, that's the least of our worries at this point. So it's like kind of a noted thing, but
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's.
We need to get the content kind of done, and then those are kind of the refinements and packaging and things like that.
You definitely don't want to start hyperlinking before you're done. You will have weird artifacts.
Yeah.
Good, well, anyhow, I'm glad you're considering it, because as the article we read before we even started on this, indicated it's the user-friendly is very important, and
Right.
you've made it much more logically organized, but without such linkage, you lose a lot of the user-friendliness.
Right, and almost if you kind of link too much or have too many cross references, you just spin people into,
Right.
like,
Circular, you go back and forth to the same thing.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Gina and Martha, do you guys want to introduce this piece?
Yeah, you might as well get
Yeah.
going, since we all have to kick off early.
Yeah.
I can
Go ahead and do the
Through
introduction.
that presentation?
Yeah.
All right, so this is the third kind of major chunk of the preliminary draft. This is the administrative procedures, and just for people who are, to remind ourselves, and then also for people maybe tuning in for this one, I'll go through a quick, just again, project overview, and then a summary of what's in the draft administrative procedures, and then we'll have a discussion. So just again, overall, the project is a comprehensive update to your zoning code, which is Title 17 of your municipal code. And just as you said, intended to create that concise and user-friendly set of regulations to help implement your general plan. And overall, update the zoning code to eliminate inconsistencies, clarify things, result in a transparent and predictable, consistent process, address community concerns, promote the type of development that is anticipated in your general plan, including the infill and mixed-use development within community areas, overall standardizing and simplifying the review process, and being consistent with state and federal law. So as I mentioned, this is the third piece of the preliminary draft regulations. After we go through this and get comments, both your comments on it as well as any comments submitted separately or talked about with staff, we will be taking those into consideration and creating the draft zoning code, which we'll be looking at again, looking at everything all together, including those things such as the introductory provisions, the definitions, and then reviewing that again in the public or the formal review and adoption process. So the administrative procedures are the provisions for the administration of the zoning code. So talking about who's responsible for making various decisions and what the procedures are. Overall, the provisions are intended to clarify who makes those decisions, what the procedures are, but really maintaining the bulk of existing provisions. A lot of these are kind of processes that are set, and so it's about conveying them clearly. So there's a number of chapters throughout the administrative provisions, and I'll just give a high-level kind of summary of each one of them. First is the planning authorities, which just basically describes the basic roles and functions of the primary authorities that have a role in administrating the code. So it's your Board of Supervisors, Planning Commission, the Planning Director. And then there is a review authority summary table that kind of just summarizes who makes decisions, who's the appeal body. The second chapter is a pretty dense chapter, and this has all the common procedures. So these are uniform procedures that are common to a variety of permits or processes. And that covers everything from application, environmental review, noticing procedures, effective dates, appeals, indemnification. So all these things that are common to one or more permits or review procedures. In the common procedures, we did include a new requirement for pre-application review of commercial and industrial projects. That's really intended to make sure applicants are aware of all things that may kind of apply or impact or things to think about in developing their project. Another change is an increase in the time to exercise or effectuate a permit. Currently, it's written as 1 calendar year after approval plus 24-month extension by the Planning Commission. The revised procedures have it an approval good for 2 years plus a 2-year extension, which would either be by the director or Planning Commission. And that just really reflects the time that it takes to get everything in line and really start construction. The next factor is zoning clearance, which is kind of the lowest level of review, and that's really just a check for consistency with the zoning code or any discretionary approvals before the issuance of a permit or license. So it's really planning's review. Again, any permit or license, business license. The next chapter is design review, and these are the procedures for conducting design review. And as we talked about in earlier sessions, there's a design review overlay, which identifies those areas where design review is required. So in those areas where you need design review, these are the procedures for that. So it has the review authority, the scope of the review, what that review authority is really looking at through design review, and then required findings and criteria. So the Planning Commission would conduct design review for any project that is going to the Planning Commission. So say you have maybe a hotel going to the Planning Commission and it's a design review overlay, the Planning Commission would be doing the design review. If it's a project that is within a design review overlay but does not otherwise go to the Planning Commission, the Planning Director is going to conduct the design review. Next is use permits, including administrative use permits and conditional use permits. Administrative use permits are reviewed by the director. There is public notice. There's only a public hearing if either the director refers the item to the Planning Commission or if the director's decision is appealed. And that's contrary to a conditional use permit, which is that higher level of review by the Planning Commission, public notice, and a public hearing. Temporary use permits, these are the permit procedures for those temporary uses that we've looked at before that said you need a temporary use permit for this use. So there's required findings. Some of those are modified from your current findings just to more reflect the nature of temporary uses and relate to potential impacts. And then conditions of approval can be applied to achieve that consistent we see with the required findings. The next chapter is on waivers, and this is really procedures for relief from standards where the situation, you're still consistent with the general plan, the objectives, but you don't meet the letter of the base standard and you don't qualify for a variance. So these are waivers that may be identified in the code. So you could, one was for parking reductions, you could apply for a certain level of parking reduction. The process is this waiver process. So there's waivers that are specifically identified in the code. There's an allowance for a waiver of up to 20% of a dimensional standard. And that's just really to allow some flexibility in implementation. And then also for reasonable accommodation for persons with disabilities. Waivers are not allowed for residential density. So these waivers are just processed concurrent with any other required approval. If there's no other approval, the planning director would make the decision. Variances is kind of that higher level. This is where situations where you need a variance from the standards, and it's really tied to extraordinary circumstance that's out of the control of the applicant or the property owner, and that really there's specific findings that need to be made of unless this variance is granted, the property does not have the same rights as other similar properties in the vicinity. So these are subject to a notice to public hearing and go before the Planning Commission. Plan development is when we've talked about in the context of earlier sets of regulations. So this is the revision of your plan development process, where it's the more traditional application of plan development and no longer that mechanism for basically requiring design review. So for establishing the plan development overlay district, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Development within that overlay district is subject to a plan development plan, which oftentimes and typically is processed with the application for the overlay district, but it could be processed subsequent to the establishment of the overlay district. So that details the process for that. Development agreements, this is for the most part carries forward your current allowances and provisions for development agreements, which are allowed under the government code. You do have a current reference to an obsolete body, which we removed and cleaned up. And the zoning amendments, these are for provisions for amending the zoning code text and map. And these, like the next couple of legislative actions I'll go through, the Planning Commission is the recommending body to the Board of Supervisors for decision. And that's the process, that formal process we will be going through for this update. Two new sections, although they're not kind of new in processes or procedures that you've done, but they're new as being spelled out in your code, and that's for general plan amendments and specific plans. So provisions for amending the general plan, again, the Planning Commission makes that recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Specific plans, there's provisions for preparing these and processing these. These are particular tied to a certain section of the government code. And again, Planning Commission does make the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. And then finally, enforcement, procedures for enforcing and abating violations of the code regulations. It does refer to Title I of your county code, which has kind of these general enforcement provisions. And we've been working and will continue to work with your county council to make sure that, you know, everything kind of works together, all the various enforcement provisions that you have kind of work together.
If anybody ever reads Title I, I'm just like trying to think, I don't know the last time I've read Title I. So I'm hoping we can make it more like whatever's in 8.06. Because I know that 8.0, I know Doug is changing 8.06 to make it even more streamlined. And it would be great to have us piggybacking on what he's doing for enforcement, if to the extent possible.
And we can continue to work with you, Julie, on making whatever that
Okay.
reference or, you know, however it works. It really is for the county to, you know, be written so you can use it as the best tool.
I am afraid to know what's in Title I. Okay.
Me too. I don't know the
Oh,
answer.
discussion. No, discussion, yes.
All right.
So that's just that general overview, and we can start the discussion however, wherever you'd like to start at.
How about the first paragraph? It wasn't clear to me at the end of the first paragraph on purpose that the administrators and officials shall interpret and apply the provisions of this title as minimum requirements adopted to implement the policies and achieve the objective. I don't know. I mean, they can wing it past these requirements. I'm not sure what minimum requirements means and why it isn't just apply the provisions of this title to implement the policies and achieve the objectives of the general plan.
So you're wondering why it says,
Minimum
these are the
requirements.
minimum?
Yeah,
Because as you go through the process, you could require more. So if a setback is required to be 15 feet as pursuant to this code, as you go through environmental review or something and need an additional setback, or through the discretionary review, you can require more.
well, I think that the problem can be, especially, you take the setback requirement, the minimum requirement of 15 feet would be, well, you can't have anything less than 15 feet. I mean, I just wonder if it'd be better to say, apply the provisions of this title to implement the policies and achieve the objectives of the general plan without talking about minimum requirements.
Then maybe Julie we can look at that if that's okay. I mean, this is a
Sure.
pretty common,
It doesn't, I don't have any heartburn over it either, so but up to you guys.
I see it even as if the procedural stuff are the minimum requirements, so I think I'm fine with minimum.
Me too.
Because
That's fine.
there could be conditions added to
Right,
discretionary approvals that are,
Right.
that are additional, that are
Right,
customized
conditions
based on
and/or
the project.
mitigation.
We say minimum
To me,
procedure.
it sounded fine, but that's,
How about minimum
Up-
procedural requirements then?
I think minimum requirements is fine because
Okay,
it,
okay, I mean, we've got
yeah.
2 out of 3, so not be concerned.
So I do think, and I think Julie mentioned this in her comments also, just that we need to look at what we say the scope of the planning commission, the planning director's responsibilities are, and make sure it's consistent with any
Title
other
Two,
place.
this is Title Two. This I have looked at.
Okay, wherever else it happens to be. Just to make sure that whether it stays the way it is here and gets changed in Title II, or whether we just need to coordinate things, that's all.
Make sure they're
Those are my
consistent.
only comments.
Currently is the accepted form when we're talking about the planning, I'm looking at section 040. Powers and responsibilities of the planning director or their designee. I take it it's unfavored to say his/her.
I feel like everybody's starting to go to their.
To
It's
their.
also more awkward to say his and her.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It's
So
just-
I know that in the
Okay.
way we were raised, it was grammatically incorrect because it sounds like plural, but it
Right.
seems like it's changing.
Well, I mean, if an individual can be they, I guess,
Exactly.
okay. I was just curious. Now, under the powers and responsibilities of the planning director, should there be a separate statement about recommendation to the planning commission, like on conditional use permits pursuant to chapter so-and-so? Do we want to get that detailed? It's, you make it clear later on that that's part of what the planning director does, but if we're listing the powers and responsibilities, maybe just say recommendation to the plan.
It says refer items to the planning commission where the director's opinion. You're right. It's not really just on routine.
Right,
Yeah. Like prepare staff reports or cause to be
well,
prepared the
and
staff
recommend,
reports
because
and
it's the point.
make recommendations.
Yeah. And maybe generalize it to recommend actions to the planning commission where
Right.
the planning commission is the reviewing body.
Yeah.
review authority, I guess it
It
is.
seems like supervise the preparation of, so prepare or supervise the preparation of reports and make recommendations to the planning commission and the board of supervisors sometimes.
You get where we're going, Martha?
Yeah,
Okay,
got it.
that's all I need to know.
Well, here it is, make recommendations to the planning commission and board of supervisors on all applications, appeals, and other matters
Oh.
upon which they have the authority and the responsibility to act under this title, so it's O.
Oh,
Oh, it's, oh, okay,
It's O, it's there.
yeah,
You guys had it.
that's right. You, not only, I mean, you already got it. That's
Yeah.
right. Okay, sorry about that.
It's a very nice tidy little summary of
Yeah.
who does what.
Did you, oh, I was gonna ask Gabriel if he saw anything that he needed there, but we don't have Gabriel right now. I would get to common procedures. 17.02.020. The owner of property or the owner's authorized agents, or, I would insert, comma, if the application is made by someone other than the owner or the owner's agent, proof of the right to use and possess the property is applied for. Shall accompany the, what's missing there, and which would get things rather cumbersome. So it's, a lessee makes this application, but what if the owner doesn't want the zoning amendment? I mean, do we need to have, with a concurrence of the owner or the owner's authorized agent?
Well, I think that's what it's saying.
Yeah, it says that.
Where?
It says if the application is made by someone
Yeah.
other than the owner or the owner's
Right.
agent, that proof of the right to use and possess the property as applied for.
Yes, no, that's-
Satisfactory. So we have, I don't know how much, we have forms. Now, what I don't see in here
Let's-
is a requirement for indemnification. I do think that should be,
Well, I think
Separate.
that's
But
under,
that's there
B1
later.
B1A.
It might need
later
some.
on.
B1A seems to have the indemnity thing. What,
B1.
B1A.
Oh, okay, I'm looking at a different version. So,
Oh,
there it is. Okay.
Okay.
We have a routing packet
But
and we
just,
require them to.
but hang on, because I think we're moving past my concern is, you have a lessee that under this
Yeah.
form, he can be the applicant, they can be the applicant.
Right.
But what if the owner doesn't agree?
Then they can.
They can't.
They have to have the two
Where's
owners.
the
It
concurrence?
Proof
says
of the right
proof of
to-
the right to use and possess the property
Yes.
As applied for, so it's not just, so we do on our routing forms, is what I was trying to say, so it does say satisfactory to the planning director. We do require both the owner and whoever the applicant is to
Good.
sign off on the application and
Well-
also the indemnification.
Well, that I think,
Yeah,
no, but what it doesn't state clearly is what you just said.
I think it does.
applied.
Proof of the right.
To use and possess as applied for. The as applied for means that they don't just lease it, they also are agreeing to the proposed use.
The owner is also agreeing.
Yes, that's what I think it
Okay,
says.
everybody who sees it that way, I'll see it that way.
Yeah, and that is how we currently
Okay,
do it.
I was just concerned.
So on the indemnification issue, the application form shall include an indemnity clause. I just think that any place we talk about that indemnity clause, we need to make the language all consistent and work with the more detailed version that's later in this section, but
So, right, this indemnity clause just requires the applicant to provide indemnification. We, right now, require the owner also, if the owner is different, because at the end of the day, it's easier to, the owner is an easier one to go
Right.
after for indemnification. So I know that we're talking about having a more streamlined version for special events where you might have a parade going through multiple places, or you have,
They
that's,
make me do that indemnification form now.
so but so aside for special events, I guess, it's a policy decision by, the Board of Supervisors, but and for a regular, non-special event application, I know our office would probably want both the applicant, or recommend that the applicant and owner both agree to the indemnification.
So couldn't we just whereby the applicant and or owner agrees
Yeah.
to indemnify, and it can be whatever's appropriate to the specific situation?
I wouldn't say and or.
Landowners?
Then you'd be including by implication the owner's authorized agent in that.
Usually the agent can't sign the indemnification agreement
Oh, okay.
Well, we can,
unless you have a whole agreement with the
Right.
agent to allow them to do that.
Right.
and we have an internal process to deal with that, which I'm working on streamlining, and we probably don't want that whole internal process in the ordinance. I would recommend saying applicant
And/or.
and if different landowner,
And what?
if different.
Or both, if depending on the situation, you might need both of them.
That's what I'm saying, applicant
And if
and
different
if different
Right.
landowner,
Yeah, but not the reading, the or, leaving out the or. So
not the or, because then they're gonna
Right,
say that we
okay.
don't have statutory
Yeah.
authorization
Right.
required.
And if applicable owner, or if different, yeah.
It's different, yeah.
If different is the standard language, I think
Oh.
we've used actually in
Yeah.
the indemnification agreement itself.
Okay, great. Oh,
Yeah, that was
What
my
do you- don't
whole
confuse us with
generic
that.
Yeah.
comment, was just to try to make them all consistent.
But I do agree with with maybe a more streamlined approach to special events. The exposure is generally less. So that's an internal conversation that we can have, but.
And it can be in the special events
Exactly.
section.
Right.
Okay, I'd go on to pre-application
Yeah.
review. I'd like Martha or Gina to give us an example, take us through an application for zoning clearance on a sign on a store. And also cover whether, when we're talking about commercial and industrial projects, if the property is zoned commercial, even though the project is for a single-family residence, would it be covered? But
Well,
I don't quite
yeah, a
understand.
single-family residence on a commercial zone is gonna need another entitlement,
Uh-huh,
such as a use permit, so.
yeah,
Pre-application review is a building permit for a commercial development. The idea is to have a discussion and review of plans prior to submittal of the building permit, so that we can bring in other agencies. As an example, you're a gas station or a proposed gas station, and you immediately go to the county environmental health department, not realizing who else might be involved in an application of, a permit for such a thing, just to get your, permits necessary for the gas pumps and underground tanks. There's other departments that need to be involved in such a review before you get to the point that you have, prepared all of these, expensive plans and gone through and gotten permits from EMA. You've got the building department, you've got the planning department, and in some cases you have public works. And what we see too often is that, individuals with an idea to open a new business or, build a new building, they hone in. It's a restaurant. I'm going to go directly to EMA. They're going to be having these ongoing discussions with one department, not realizing what might lie in front of them in regard to another department, such as zoning. So many times that we've gotten to the point where people are so far down the road with their development, and then they come to the planning department, and usually it's in the form of a building permit, and we're looking at this going, gee, it's not allowed. You either need a conditional use permit, or, we haven't talked about your parking situation. There's all kinds of things that need to be dealt with and kind of aired out prior to a building permit, and that's really what we're trying to avoid. We've had a lot of discussions between the planning department, building, and EMA specifically, and we all agree that this is a process that would be beneficial to the applicants and landowners as well as the county. I mean, it's not very pleasant having to put the brakes on a project that is, almost in their minds near the finish line of, of
Okay, I
their,
understand.
of the
Okay.
process.
And what's going to make them aware of this? What's going to keep that from happening even with this on the book?
Track it.
Yeah, track it as our friend.
And the handouts will need to be
Handouts.
updated for all the departments to.
And constant communication between the, involved agencies to understand that there is a zoning clear, a pre-application that is required. And so as soon as one of those other agencies is starting to have communications with a potential developer, then, that's when the discussions need to start happening. Hey, we've got this process. You need to go through a pre-application review. You need to go talk to the planning department. And at that point, there shouldn't be any more actions, no more discussions on anything until the planning department is involved and we start, setting up this
And
pre-application
hopefully the other
review.
agency would notify you also.
Yes.
That's happening.
Right, and
Okay.
even people like Kathy Galino, who has early,
Absolutely.
yeah, and getting that word out to
Right.
all the people in
Right.
the county who regularly work. But
Right.
we used to have this, and we called it site development or site plan review, and
Yeah.
it would come and go over the course of the last 40 years.
Yeah.
And it's always been great, but there was never a way to capture the cost of having that done. And so sometimes under various different planning directors, sometimes it was a very substantive process that was really great and really did tease out all the issues. And under others, you got sort of that standard response from every department saying you have to comply with the
Yes.
Right.
building
With our
code.
We're
requirements.
hoping to have a little bit more than just, a written response that says, you need to comply with the standards. We envision more of a process where we're actually reviewing a plan and we're all sitting down at the same table discussing the project. That way, everybody is hearing the same thing, because what we often get is, an individual will be communicating with one agency and they'll be specifically honed in talking about, that regulation. And then it'll be generally, oh, you've got to go talk to the building department and you've got to go talk to the planning department. And maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't, but then the information is not really relaying back to the other, agency that might be the lead agency in some cases. And so there's just that lack of communication and a lack of understanding from the applicant's standpoint, because they think, oh, well, it's fine, I know that it's okay in that zoning, so why do I need to go talk to the planning department? So it's, we have to obviously, put together a procedure for it and then talk about possible fees if that's,
I think
because
these fees to reimburse the
Yeah.
departments will get you much
Yeah.
better answers.
Yeah.
You have these are advisory only.
Right.
And we might have missed something. But when it was working well, you would actually solve a problem where there were
Yes.
conflicting requirements.
Right.
And like maybe an encroachment that had to be too close to an intersection and then there would be a way to solve that. Somebody would say, oh, I can provide flexibility on
Right.
that in this particular project. So I am totally thrilled to see this come.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, well, I wasn't here for some of the conversation, but are these fee-based?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. I don't.
Because,
Well,
because.
That's part of, that's not, that's a discussion that we'll have to have as
Okay.
a process,
Okay,
an
Yeah,
internal process.
I don't, it's part of the administration, administrative procedure.
No, we don't outline fees in
Fees,
the,
okay.
in the
Just
code.
says there is a fee schedule.
Yeah.
Um,
And we have a fee schedule, and if we decide that there's gonna be a fee associated with such a process, then we'll have to amend the fee schedule.
And is it clear, or does there need to be a definition of what commercial and industrial projects means? I mean, are we just talking about things that are zoned commercial?
We would be, yeah, because you're not gonna have a commercial development in a residential zone.
Right, right. So, I mean, we're really looking at the current.
We're
zone.
looking at commercial zoning and industrial zoning.
Or, yeah, but you might want to clarify whether it's zoning and use or.
That's what I was
Yeah,
wondering.
I think that's what he's trying to get.
We can
at.
clarify that.
Especially if you're maybe modifying something that's existing. Legal non-conforming.
Oh, boy. Let's get back to that.
You could make the fee a percentage possibly of the total of the fee that there would be charged anyway, but that only matters if there's a discretionary permit, not,
Right.
yeah, forget that. Different
Anyhow,
conversation
you're gonna deal
altogether.
with.
yeah, I mean, I think we may, I mean, if this is how we're going to go, it would have to be done based on some kind of evidentiary basis that this is the amount of time we're spending to do this, which would come out of a nexus study and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure if you can just identify an arbitrary number and say, it's going to cost you $2,500. It has to be based on something, but we can get into that. The point I'm trying to make is that this pre-application process is actually a tool that other planning divisions in other communities are using as part of an introduction into the discretionary process that a project might bring at a future time, and it's got a fee attached to it. If you want this, it's going to cost you this, and the benefits are you get to find out all the things, potential conditions of approval, concerns, et cetera, so you don't pay the money first and then get rejected. At least you go through this process and you get an understanding, especially when other agencies within the county are going to get involved in the process as well.
My point was that it won't necessarily cost the applicant more in the long run because it may
It'll be
actually
included.
save them.
Yeah.
It's gonna save staff time
Right.
in the next stage because they will have already done some of the
Right.
preliminary work.
But-
And hopefully you will head off the really traumatic situation.
Right. And I suppose applications or proposed development that is subject to a use permit could in fact go through an application, pre-application review, much like we offer now, only for free. But this is, but the main intent is to capture those that don't have discretionary action required.
Right.
So those ministerial permits that may just kind of waffle through the process, or I should say stumble through the process and, come out into the end and everything's all confused because, they didn't spend any time talking to Public Works and all of their discussions were with the building department and so on and so on. So it could definitely be something that would be applied for both, future discretionary actions, but primarily for those ministerial projects.
and hugely beneficial for owners who are trying to navigate it themselves and hire different people to
Absolutely.
do things, and they don't actually have a professional
Yeah.
I
sort
believe
of leading them.
I may have missed something in this conversation, but it just, so you're wanting to do the mandatory pre-application review on ministerial, commercial and industrial projects? Cause I just don't know that people will look to Title 17 for that.
That's what
Yeah.
we're saying,
Yeah.
is how do you get that word out there?
So they're gonna have to, I guess what I missed is that they would be paying, and I guess I'm also a little bit confused maybe conceptually on how that's different from zoning clearance, because when we get a building permit application right now, it's routed for essentially zoning clearance, but done for free.
Yes.
I guess maybe I'm just missing, how is that different from pre-application?
Well, the pre-application is targeting commercial and industrial development, which often has other components like parking, circulation, grading, more stringent building code requirements. Commercial projects often include public works and environmental management, performance standards that
Fees.
apply to a project. And so there's all kinds of design features that need to be incorporated in that a lot of people just don't understand.
So that would be in lieu of a zoning clearance, they would need a bigger
Right.
thing called a pre-application.
Right, so the zoning clearance is just a basic kind of function that we will be performing on almost a daily basis with every building permit, building permit application, business license, those types of ministerial kinds of applications. We would just be doing just kind of a review to make sure that, and we pretty much do this now, is that whatever's proposed is compliant with county
But
zoning.
what makes those not commercial projects?
What makes what?
What you were just, say it's just a sign, zoning clearance for a sign.
We wouldn't have
Is that-
pre-application for a sign.
No.
No, I realize that, but that.
We have to define
That must mean that it is not a
Okay.
commercial project.
We need to define, I think, what that
Yeah.
term, commercial and industrial,
Right.
for purposes of this
Yeah.
section.
I think so, because otherwise it would fit in there.
Right, I think that we do, certainly for a new construction project, building project, the pre-application is valuable to people. And a lot of those projects are gonna have some discretionary piece of it that people that we're totally unaware of.
Right.
So I think we just need to make clear just what is covered here by saying commercial or industrial project and industrial project.
And figure out a procedure for how to make sure people are aware of it.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be,
When I read it and I saw that it was mandatory, I did think, oh, would I have even thought on a very simple project that seemed to have no, seemed to comply with everything, there's nothing, would I think to go ask for this? Probably not.
So if you have, I'm just thinking out loud, if you have like right now there's a retail store, you are opening a pet store, you need a building permit for a really small section of it, but it's an existing retail space, do you need pre-application review before you get your? Yes,
Probably not,
okay.
no,
No.
'cause it's not
All
a,
right, but it is commercial, so,
right.
yeah, so
So
that's.
it's defining what requires it. Or making it optional and seeing how that works and then deciding whether or not to make it mandatory at some point. It would certainly be you could make it mandatory for anything that requires any discretionary permit as part of it. And separate them that way. Because you're gonna find out about those pretty quickly.
Right.
Another option would maybe be to have it mandatory for new construction or new construction over a certain amount of size, optional otherwise. And then in the handouts or the promotional material you do for this, you can encourage it for some of those other, kind of identify scenarios where it may be a good idea. Because I think what Gina is saying is really, this is intended to be a service to help people save time and money. Zoning clearance is really the sign off when the building permit comes through. And at that time, they've invested a lot of money, your construction drawings, your, everything else you've lined up for that. I think Gina's saying we want to get ahead of that a little bit and save you iterations in this kind of, like consolidated, where you hear from more people from the county than, talking to everyone individually. So maybe we narrow down the mandatory to, I guess, new construction over a certain amount of size, but really kind of in the promotional materials, talk about the benefits of the pre-application review for other types of projects.
I mean, if it's free, nobody will be upset about it, right? It's just that if there's a fee for it.
But if it's free, you're not gonna get
Right.
all the departments
Right.
putting the kind of
Because
effort.
time
that
is,
you need.
time is money, and the other departments, I mean, we may, be able to pass that along at no cost, but I can guarantee you that other departments are not gonna be in favor of that. I mean, everyone is so strapped for time that,
And there are things like whether or not you need fire sprinklers
Yeah.
in a commercial or industrial building.
right,
That a lot of times people are unaware of until they get to the building permit
Right.
process. And right now, when you get comments from the building department early on, they just say, like, we see them all the time on routed stuff, must comply with the building code. But what that person needed to know is,
Yeah.
I need fire sprinklers and I need fire flow to run those fire sprinklers. So,
And those-
and they wouldn't even be looking into that.
Yeah.
right.
And those could be some of the benefits of that pre-application review. Another thing that people would want to know would be fees that they have to pay. And you can't get that with a zoning clearance, unfortunately. So when we have a detailed project, we're able to, other departments will be able to calculate what are your RIM fees, or what your RIM fees are going to be from Public Works, or some of the permit costs might be from the building department, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good tool to have.
Another common thing is, like you're using a gas station as an example, is how are those encroachments and stacking space going to
Right.
work? And you're gonna get that from Public Works.
No.
But you're not gonna think about it, and you're gonna think, I can fit everything in here like
Right,
this, no
right.
problem. And you're not going to be able to.
Well, and I think the planning department is a little unique, because of the process that we're involved in with discretionary applications. We have a really good understanding about what other agencies do, and when we need to refer someone to another agency. And so we're not just looking at zoning code, we kind of we're looking at projects on a much broader, with a broader picture, where I think other agencies, because they don't interact with each other the way we do through the discretionary application process, they have a tendency to be a little more funneled into their, into their own code, and not really looking out beyond, their own specifics. So I think I think it could be very useful if we can figure out how to do it right. And just save people an awful lot of time and money, down the road, and make the whole process a lot easier. Because
It has common sense.
it has
all over it.
yeah, and I'm not saying that we've really thought the whole thing through, but I think just generally the idea of it is a good one. Because, at the end, when everyone is, arguing over, nitpicking over little things that, you've got one applicant that just can't get through the process because each agency is wanting something different and they just can't seem to put the whole thing together. It doesn't look good, I think, for us as a county, it looks like we're throwing up roadblocks rather than trying to be helpful. And that's not really the intent. Yes, we've got code that we have to comply with, but, we don't intend to make the process difficult for people. We want to make it easier. We want to be helpful and see that the projects are actually going through and being successful and, not being burdensome.
I
So,
think you should write the flyer.
oh,
I think, I mean, that's the pitch that needs to be made.
No, you're right.
You must do this. It's that here's an
Right.
opportunity, that we are gonna require you to
Right.
do this, but this is what you're gonna get out of it.
Yeah,
because a lot of people just don't know where to start.
right.
Yeah.
I don't even know what all agencies are involved.
No.
Right?
Yeah, yeah. And the experienced developers would actually prefer to have this kind of a pre-application
Right.
thing because they want to know a lot more than they will be able to get
Right.
by just looking at our zoning code. So
And in
it's
fact,
very
a lot of them ask for it.
Absolutely.
So they've obviously been working with other jurisdictions and it seems to be pretty customary.
It is.
But, we just, like I said, we've offered it as kind of a,
Freebie.
a freebie, but there's not a lot of people that take advantage of it. And I think just because, one, it's not written into code, two, it's just something that we just, haven't really gotten out there to the community and beyond to let them know that, hey, this is available to you, let's take advantage of it.
And the public think it's the building department. That's the
Right.
first place they go. They just don't understand how
No.
all the departments interact together.
No.
And that's the important part. So I
And the
think it's
last thing
great.
you want to do is be looking at a building permit with a full set of plans and engineered plans, come to find out it's not allowed in that zone district.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Hey, should we move on to .050?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the review of application. It just,
I had a question on the review of applications, just looking at the deadlines. Did you guys, was that changed? I was looking at, in my version, it said that there had to be a final decision on an appeal. Determination. The fact that an appeal may be made, okay, I'm sorry, I think I misunderstood. I think I read your incompleteness deadline as if the decision on the appeal itself had to happen within 60 days, despite going to two different hearing bodies. So I'm sorry, that was my bad. I
Okay.
think I misread it. Sorry.
But that brings up something else, which was another one of my overarching comments was just looking at the deadlines everywhere and making sure that we're all consistent with everything, because I lose track of what's 15 days, what's 30 days, what's 60, how long can CEQA take, Anyway, I'm sure you guys are doing that.
Oh, yeah.
well, I wonder if there could be a graph, the way we have these charts in here about, with some sort of disclaimer that it may not be completely, but if you
This is
say
the
60
fastest
days,
it could
such and such.
possibly happen.
Yeah. But of course, then it would be 60 days from what, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
Anyway,
probably can't be done. Okay, applications being deemed withdrawn. I think they're just, the word "be" is missing on the second line. Shall be withdrawn and henceforth be null and void. I would go to findings and decision, section 090.
My only thing here was more that, just that we double check all the noticing requirements are consistent with any place else we might have noticing requirements.
Well, I did notice that under the mailed notice, under A2, it does provide a larger than 300-foot radius if deemed necessary by the director to provide adequate public notification. When we were talking about the community ID signs or whatever they were this morning. So that's right in there that it's not limited to 300 foot.
And it does say that anybody who has requested notices regarding specific applications, which is something we talked about in part of the greenhouse gas thing. I can't remember earlier in this. Anyway, it seemed fine, but it seems like something for the legal folks.
So I think that's
Make-
actually state law.
And then Martha, I presume Mintier Harnish is gonna review all of the different noticing deadlines against state law before we finish?
Yeah, and we have
Okay,
two, but yes.
Yeah.
great.
Well, but there was, I know Julie was concerned about just in other places, things where we talk about noticing, not creating something that a requirement greater than state law by anything we say.
Right, it's
Right.
optional,
Right.
but not mandatory.
Yes, that we might choose to
Yeah.
do it, right. That was my only. Okay, findings and decisions.
Yeah, it seems to me this opening paragraph is, as a reverse order, we should deal with the findings of fact before we get to notice of action. And so that we would read something like this. When deciding to modify, revoke, or deny any discretionary permit under this title, the reviewing authority shall then skip to make findings of fact as required by this title and any applicable state or federal law, and the reviewing authority, or if the reviewing authority is the Planning Commission, the director shall issue a notice of action.
So make findings first before issue a notice of action.
Yeah, it just,
Yeah,
it just
yeah,
seems
just so it's
logical.
in the
Right.
sequential.
But, yeah, and now, do you issue a notice of action when we have a resolution, or does it, I mean, it's a separate document, notice of
I
action?
didn't know there was anything after you made it. So here it says the review authority, which could be the planning commission, issues a notice of action. So right now, the planning commission only does the resolution.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm saying,
Yeah.
if the review authority is the planning commission, the director shall issue the notice of action. But we need to
I
make.
don't know what the current process is.
Well,
We
planning
actually
commission doesn't
put
issue
together-
any.
Yeah, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Martha, but I believe it would be, the notice of action would be equivalent to the notice of determination,
But that's a
That's
CEQA.
CEQA,
right,
yeah.
But notice of
On any
action,
decision.
on any decision.
I think it's just the final document that results, right?
yeah, because it's capitalized here as if it's a term of art. It's not a
Yeah.
term of art in state law that I'm aware of. So it looks like we're creating some new requirement to issue a notice of action, but I don't know what you already do after a decision is reached. by the
Other
planning
than,
commission.
other than the
Resolution.
resolution or approved conditions of approval for
Right.
such like an administrative permit, we don't have an actual document that's called a notice of action.
Well, that's
And
what
what
I
does
was wondering.
issuing it
Right.
look like? Does that mean, do you send decisions of the planning commission to the applicant or
Yes.
appellants or
Yes.
anything like? Oh, okay.
And in terms of, if we have an administrative application that doesn't require a public hearing and therefore would not require the notice of public hearing, which is usually the mechanism that notifies adjacent, 300-foot adjacent property owners, we would then send the 300-foot adjacent property owners a notice
On the decision.
of the decision that was made, which would then give them the option to appeal the decision.
Well, so that's, so the concern, I mean, we want the appeal deadline to be based on the date the decision was made, not the date of any notice of action
Right.
It's-
issued or received. So
Right.
do you
It
want
is
it?
15 days.
Okay,
15 days from the date of the note, date of the action
Right.
gives you the opportunity to file an
It's
appeal.
interesting
I
to
just
me.
wondered if notice of action
Yeah.
is an actual term, or if we should be calling that something, not using the word notice, which implies that it's some kind of legal
it does.
document.
Make it
at least
sound
to
like
me.
it.
In C, it talks about shall be stated in writing in the resolution or record of the action.
Yeah.
So what about the review authority shall make findings of fact and the director shall inform all parties of the decision or something like that?
Exactly, that's what I was saying, or a
Yeah.
letter documenting it, or whatever,
But we have to.
something that
and it-
doesn't have a name.
Yeah, it's certainly not capitalized.
Yeah.
But or have notice of action be defined somewhere as, you know,
Yeah.
the document that gives the applicant and the public notice.
Right. And
Action
it could
is
be
occurring.
something we can actually post on the website rather than sending it out to every single person.
Yeah,
I
whatever.
just think we just need a more generic description. A
And,
description of the action being taken, not like it's a document.
So I think what we're trying to, I'm assuming what we're trying to get at here is that whether it goes to the planning commission or not, the director or the planning commission should have some sort of written findings of fact supporting whatever that decision is. And then regardless of whether it's the board or the planning commission or the director or the planning department should be just informing the parties, we can say informing instead of notice of the
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah.
and the date of action or something like that, so that it's clear that the date of that notice is not.
And instead of saying notice, we would say inform
Yeah.
all parties of the resulting decision, or send a copy to them, or something along those lines.
And somehow it needs to make clear that if the review authority is the planning commission, or I guess the board of supervisors, is the director that gives them.
Or the director.
So down under B, we actually indicate that, that this notice is gonna be, posted with the county clerk. Is that such a bad thing? I mean, it's
This-
kind of
this-
good, I mean, that we're,
This is-
transparent.
This is looking more like a CEQA requirement.
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. It's
Well,
looking
that's
like-
why I was thinking it sounds almost identical to an NOD, but like you said, that's attached to CEQA and isn't necessary, attached to, or is it? I'm
Maybe
thinking-
maybe expanding on kind of Julie's take, like on the noticing about just having kind of the minimum codified. Would there be any problem if we just take out that and that? Because you're stating that there's findings of fact being made, that they're stated in writing in the resolution or record of action.
Okay.
And then it sounds like you would just continue your existing practice.
Okay.
And we could just say the review authority shall make written findings of fact, and then after, because we don't have written in there, I do think it's good to have them in writing, and I agree with Martha on the rest, if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, I think all of this is great, I just think it needs to sound more like this is just
A courtesy.
a courtesy, a summary of what happened and codification of the
Well,
dates.
And there's, there's,
Terrible.
But if it's giving notice of a time for appeal or whatever, why it's not just a favor,
well, but if it's not required of law, then we probably need to be careful how far we go with it, because at the time that you don't do it,
right.
Yes.
you're gonna get called out on it. And if we've already, if we've got it written into code that we're specifically doing X, Y,
Yeah.
and Z,
Right.
and there's otherwise, like I said, not a requirement by law for us to do that, then probably should be cautious as to
Well,
whether or
the
not we're
The
gonna.
whole subsection B is up for grabs, right?
Or just change the wording and soften it up to say that. So they're not issuing a notice of action, they're sharing or distributing to all the people that it said get it here. Just making sure that we just say all we're doing is summarizing what happened, telling people what the next step is. And it's going to these people who requested notification or who should get notification.
Yeah, I mean, under CEQA, CEQA notification, we're just gonna have to comply with CEQA.
Right.
Those do have to go to the county clerk. There's
Right,
A lot of
right.
notice steps, but also, the other thing, I'm just, at the date of the action, it says these deadlines do not apply to any action that has been appealed to the Board of Supervisors, but what about appeal to the Planning Commission? It seems like appeal to the Planning Commission or Board of Supervisors, because you could have an AUP appeal to the Planning Commission.
Well, here, I'm looking under subsection A, it says these deadlines do not apply to any action that has been appealed in accordance with.
It says to the board, though,
No.
it's specific to the appeals.
That's what I'm.
Julie, you might be looking at a previous version.
I think
Oh,
it's-
you know what? I think you're right. The problem is that I put, I probably am looking at a prior, and I probably didn't realize that you had already fixed that. Sorry.
Yeah, but you're sharp.
Sorry.
You caught it before, and by God, you caught it again.
You know, I know, I'm looking at two separate online copies. It's,
The
okay.
next time we have our meeting, why you get your copies straight. Anyhow, that seems to be taken. And so,
So Martha's gonna have to, leave us at 1 o'clock, just to let you know.
Yeah.
And we're wrapping up, I
Okay.
think. In fact, why don't we consider this the last section?
Okay.
Okay.
And finish discussing it? It does seem like the findings and decisions, we have two kinds. We have the CEQA-related ones that have a more formal process, and then everything else. And maybe we just need to work that into here, so like when required by state law.
We could just say, like, you know, CEQA-related notices shall be
Yeah.
filed in accordance with
yeah,
state
Yeah,
law.
state law.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
right, and gives separate,
So as we are carefully softening, we don't want to take out the requirement.
yes, right.
Yes.
And then there's, with the deadlines for what you guys have to do after an application is deemed complete. Martha, did you guys, so the Permit Streamlining Act, as I'm sure you know, has a variety of exceptions. There's rules that say even if we violated it, if we need to have more time for CEQA, the courts have said, we get the extra time for CEQA. Did you guys go and do like the minimum under permit streamlining, or are we making things more difficult for ourselves than maybe we need to under state law?
So I guess we could just say, timelines are pursuant to, CEQA.
And then there's
we
the
just,
Permit Streamlining Act as well, but I'm just trying to get, like, where the 30 day, like, where's the 60 days and the 30 days? Did that come from someplace? I mean, I see for CEQA, that's the case, but,
right.
yeah. Yeah.
So I guess I'm a little confused. Are you talking about like for permit streamlining for when the director determines whether something's complete or not?
Yeah, I just want to, I'm just, so this is in 30 days.
That's back.
So within 30 days, I don't know, I guess I don't know, as I sit here, whether CEQA always requires an NOE decision, a notice of exemption decision within 30 days of the completeness. Is that coming from from CEQA as far as you understand?
Yep.
Okay.
So not from when it's accepted as complete.
Right.
So prior to that, the Permit Streamlining Act does have deadlines for
When we have to deem it complete. Yeah. Okay.
which then you can extend, blah, blah, blah.
The blah, blah, blah.
So blah, 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 yeah,
That I can relate to.
yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm just gonna assume that you guys have already looked at all of this and we're not being harder on ourselves than state law requires.
So,
And Julie, if there is a concern, we can take those out. This is more like of an informative thing. State laws is what it is.
Yeah, and changes
So-
too, so.
Right.
yeah,
So,
my feeling is if we repeat what state law requires and then state law amends
Right.
itself, we're in big trouble. So I think a reference to state law is preferable.
okay.
I agree, especially if we can give them a good reference to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, you have kind of an idea of our amorphous direction here.
Got it.
Great. In fact, Martha, I have told my wife that all I need is a got it from Martha, and I relax.
Or a thumbs up, I can give you a thumbs up too.
Yes.
Are you guys all done with the section?
We are gonna say that we will pick it up at 1702-100
Right.
on December 14th.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
This time I'm gonna make a note of it.
I'm writing it right in here. December 14th, start here.
That's what I've
Yeah,
got.
and I think I'm giving up on trying to have two documents out
Oh,
on my
yes.
laptop screen. I'm gonna come in with a hard copy next time. Sorry, everybody, for that.
Right.
It is easier sometimes.
Can you
Great.
scribble quickly?
It's too small a screen.
If
I have a
you-
big monitor in my
If you
office.
have a chance to give us comments on the current copy, that would be great. It's hard to go to the previous one,
All right.
click on your
I'll
copy.
give you guys a different memo.
That would be wonderful.
Okay.
You only have to start here, page 16.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
so let me,
Are there any commissioner reports?
None from me.
Do we
Planning
need,
director report?
No, Madam Chair.
no, I'm just, we don't need to continue this subject to the 14th.
Do we do?
Do we?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I move
Yes.
that we do the right thing in continuing the subject to the
I thought
14th.
we had, because it's an informational item and it's
It was a
already on
standard-
the
It was a
future
standard.
agendas, but we should go ahead.
We're just doing it. It doesn't need to be noticed, but just so everybody understands.
Yes, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None.
And you will all be sending me your
Our
the
schedule.
bill, your schedules of when you cannot meet, so we can start
After the
to,
11th of
Okay.
January.
Yes.
all right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.
Are we offline now?
We are adjourned.
Now we are.
Well, we-